The guardian of Goguryeo was Dae-Mangniji Yeon Gaisamun. He has passed away, and his death has severely fractured Goguryeo, and it no longer had the strength to stop the massive army of the Tang dynasty. In the year 668 AD, the brilliant sun witnessed a horrifying scene, a sharp blade raised high. A commanding shout that decided life and death rang out. After the cry, the executioner mercilessly swung his blade down, and a head flew from its body. The bound crowd could not help but feel terrified upon seeing this. Desperate cries for mercy mingled with shouts for the one just executed. The severed head was disgustedly kicked off the platform by the soldiers. A man in a red cloak sat on his armored horse, coldly watching the bloody scene. The surrounding soldiers burst out laughing in mockery. Look at the wretched Goguryeo cowards trembling. The next person was about to be dragged onto the platform to meet their end. The soldier carrying the blood-stained blade smirked his eyes devoid of any pity. The great blade was raised high, and the trembling man begged, "Please." The soldier with cruel eyes sneered coldly, "You should blame your own country for being so weak." The man's pupils contracted in fear as he awaited death. Suddenly, an arrow flew through the air, embedding itself precisely in the head of the soldier about to strike. To everyone's shock, the soldier instantly collapsed lifeless. The man in the red cloak was also stunned, his deadly eyes growing even colder. From a distance, the sound of approaching hoofbeats could be heard. A large cavalry force was charging towards them. Their distinctive crimson three-legged crow flags were quickly recognized. The Tang soldiers were startled to realize it was the black-armored demon cavalry. Goguryeo's cavalry has arrived. The distance between them closed rapidly, the thundering of hooves growing louder. The man in the red cloak growled a warning, "Do not waver." Though fearful, the soldiers stood their ground, preparing to fight. A sharp, gleaming blade was pointed toward the ground. With only 3,000 troops, they dare to dream of fighting our 100,000 Tang soldiers. The man in the red cloak declared coldly, "These remnants of Goguryeo are no match for me." The black-armored demon cavalry drew near. The man in the red cloak fearlessly led the charge of the Tang army, growling again, "These remnants of Goguryeo are no match for me. Commander of the black-armored demon cavalry, face my spear." Armored war horses crashed into one another, sharp blades glinting with a deadly light, ready to be drenched in blood. Jen Tian gripped the reins tightly, his cold eyes focused only on clearing out the enemy before him. The two commanders charged directly at each other. Jen Tian swung his blade in a single arc, his horse never slowing as the blade cut cleanly through his opponent's body. The Tang soldiers were utterly terrified to see their general taken down in a single strike. In the blink of an eye, Jen Tian was before the massive army on his horse. The blade in his hand swung, sending the heads of those standing nearby flying. The soldiers could not react in time, their mouths agape in horror. From his horse, Jen Tian's deadly gaze fell upon them like that of an enraged King Yama. The black-armored demon cavalry swiftly charged into the enemy ranks, the orders to stop them having no effect. A bloody scene unfolded with nothing but swinging blades and the deep red color of blood everywhere. Cold spears pierced through soldiers, and a rain of arrows descended, leaving the enemy defenseless. The black-armored demon cavalry easily took their opponents' lives with single strikes. The ground quickly stained a deep crimson. The sunlit sky itself seemed to turn blood red, accentuating the deep crimson of the three-legged crow banners flying amidst the fierce battlefield. The prisoners were evacuated by the soldiers. Amidst the piles of corpses, a lone soldier sat gasping for breath. The soldier's eyes burned with hatred and resentment as he ground out the words "black-armored demon cavalry." Before he could recover, a blade swung decisively and took his head. His final hateful words, "You cursed war demons," were left unfinished. The ground was littered with incomplete corpses. Jen Tian sat on his horse, his blade easily taking enemy lives. Disgust and fury were clear on his face. From a distance, a massive army was approaching. A loud shout rang out, "General, the Tang army is coming up from behind." Hearing this, Jen Tian turned to look at the army drawing ever closer. He quickly dispatched Yuan Hui to Pyongyang City to handle the escort of the civilians. Fu Lu and Wu Lu were to hold off the enemy's pursuit. He tightened his grip on the blade in his hand. "I will clear a path," he said in a cold voice, his eyes turning even more frigid. The cold, sharp tip of his blade was ready to wreak havoc. With a flash of light signaling its readiness, his warhorse Yujan immediately shot forward. Its terrifying speed struck fear into the enemy soldiers. The civilians followed closely behind as swift strokes of his blade cleared the way. A guiding shout rang out, "Stay close together, don't look back." Before long, the path was cleared, and there was no one left to block their way. Only then did Zhen Tian, sitting on his horse, pause and glance back. The now safe civilians were running with all their might behind him, while the Tang soldiers were being held back by the He Jia Gui Ma Dui, forming a solid shield. Suddenly, a voice called out, "General, please allow this humble one to fight." A man clasped his hands and pleaded, "I want to protect my family and Gao Ju Li with my own hands." Beside him, his son looked up at his father, astonished. The boy suddenly shouted, "No, father, I want to fight." Zhen Tian remained silent, lowering his gaze to look at the boy. "General, please, let me fight." The boy looked up at Zhen Tian, voicing his desire. He glanced sideways, seemingly considering the boy's request. He was met with the boy's look of sheer determination and hope. Zhen Tian asked, "Do you know how to ride a horse? If you can't ride, you can't fight." The boy just stared at him, blankly, stammering he truly didn't know how to ride. Zhen Tian ordered, "Give this child a horse." The man gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. A large scar was still visible on the man's face. He instructed his son, "All right, you go protect your mother and sister." With that, he pushed off and quickly mounted a horse. Zhen Tian commanded loudly, "Take care of the elderly, the children, and the injured, and run towards Pyongyang City." The boy turned away, a tear rolling down from the corner of his eye. The boy thought to himself, "Father, I will protect mother and sister." The man's face was stern, his gaze filled with determination. The boy prayed that his father would surely return alive. In the distance, an army as numerous as ants swarmed towards them. Zhen Tian raised the blade in his hand, pointing its sharp tip toward the enemy. He shouted, "Don't let a single one of them through." The soldiers roared in reply, ready for battle. The last of the civilians finally reached the city gate, but the tall red gate remained shut tight. The people frantically pounded on the door. Cries for help rang out one after another. "Please open the gate! Please save us!" High on the city walls, the guards stood motionless, watching the scene below. A guard heard the pleas for help, his face showing no emotion. The people below continued to knock, tears of desperation streaming down their faces amidst a mix of hope and fear. The cries to open the gate seemed to echo throughout the entire city. Inside the main hall, a hand gripping the armrest of a throne trembled. The man in red robes sat on the throne with a grim expression. "Captain of the guard, is there really no other way?" The one who spoke was Bao Zhangwang, the final emperor of Gao Ju Li. The official knelt before him, bowing his head low, and said, "This servant deserves death. The enemy's numbers are too great." Bao Zhangwang clenched his teeth, his breathing heavy. Tears rolled down his face. "Your Majesty, you must flee before the encirclement tightens." Dao Wu De was the emperor's captain of the guard. He struggled to speak of the situation, the nation that our ancestor Zhu Meng founded. "I have failed to protect it." Bao Zhangwang leaned back in his throne, sighing as he spoke. "Even if I escape, where could I possibly go?" "I have already prepared a boat," Wu De said. "Your Majesty must sail south and regroup our forces." Bao Zhangwang closed his eyes, letting out a troubled sigh. His voice came out slowly. "If we can even regroup our forces, who will fight?" The question highlights the current stalemate. We still have Grand Envoy Cao Zhen Tian. Wu Di loudly announced the name he favored the Grand Envoy. The once closed eyes of Bao Zhangwang shot open, his voice filled with disbelief. He is still around. He suddenly called for the captain of the guard. Wu De immediately replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. Can you grant a request of mine?" With that, he looked towards the right corner of the grand hall. There was a figure standing there. Bao Zhangwang furrowed his brow. His eyes held a carefully thought-out calculation. Wu De also glanced over, seeing a woman holding a newborn baby who was sleeping soundly with its eyes shut. The soundly sleeping baby in her arms was Yi Ji. On the bloody battlefield, the man passed away, awaited by his son, who had already fallen in battle. Zhen Tian sat on his horse coldly, looking at the man's corpse. His gaze did not waver in the slightest. He thought to himself, "Your son will remember your death." The ground was littered with the intermingled corpses of men and horses. In the distance, tens of thousands of soldiers were still waiting to advance. A voice rang out, "These Tang grunts are as numerous as ants. There's no end to them." Fu Lu behind Zhen Tian laughed and asked Wu Lu, Are you scared? The question successfully angered the other. What? Fu Lu gritted his teeth, determined to issue a challenge. Let's see who can kill more. Wu Lu immediately accepted. All right, this is getting more and more interesting. Yuan Hui said to Zhen Tian, the situation has completely turned against us. The vast Tang army was drawing closer and closer to them. The wind swept by, making Zhen Tian's black cloak flutter. He spoke. It seems we won't be able to ride freely anymore. Fu Lu made his suggestion. Grand Envoy, let's have a contest to see which of us can kill the most. The loser has to go pluck Great King Yama's beard. Hearing this, Zhen Tian considered it a contest. He saw the excited faces of his 3 retainers. Zhen Tian, still with a stoic expression, replied, "That sounds interesting." Hearing him say that, the 3 of them broke into bright, happy smiles. Then everyone in the squad burst into laughter simultaneously. Their laughter echoed across the vast land. It rang out towards a sky dyed gold by the evening sun amidst a battlefield littered with blood-red corpses. Yuan Hui wore a gentle smile, a rare expression for someone on a brutal battlefield. The soldiers also looked at each other and smiled cheerfully. Their smiles were full of exhilaration and optimism. It was as if they were no longer on death's land thick with the stench of blood. Or perhaps this was their final smile. Yuan Hui glanced over and saw that Zhen Tian was also cracking a smile. This final battlefield seems quite lively. Yuan Hui gently closed his eyes, a soft smile also on his lips, as his grip on the blade in his hand tightened. Zhen Tian raised his spear high, readying himself. The soldiers immediately returned to a state of high alert. We absolutely cannot let a single person set foot in Ping Rang City. Zhen Tian's eyes filled with a deadly look as he hissed out every word through gritted teeth. Suddenly, the tall, tightly shut city gate showed signs of movement. A horseman emerged from within the city. Zhen Tian heard the noise and glanced back. The rider came straight towards them. The messenger shouted, "Grand Envoy Cao Zhen Tian, by order of Lai Di, all troops are to retreat." The word retreat left Zhen Tian and everyone else completely stunned. Above the sunset sky was beautiful with vibrant, colorful clouds. On the ground below, the army arranged in rows moved slowly. If we retreat, won't Ping Rang City be in danger? Wu Lu asked, puzzled. Fu Lu immediately replied, Lai Di must surely have a plan. Move to the ships prepared at the harbor and await further orders. Yuan Hui shared his speculation with Zhen Tian. It seems His Majesty intends to use the ships to head south and regroup our forces. Zhen Tian didn't answer. He glanced to the side. Are those nobles? They saw an overturned carriage with someone lying collapsed on the ground. Fu Lu said angrily, to flee while the country is on the brink of collapse, they deserve it. Wu Lu also spoke up. I should have put a hole through their heads myself. Suddenly, a man on horseback galloped over shouting, "General." The soldier pulled on the reins to stop his horse and report. A 500-man cavalry unit of the Tang army is pursuing a carriage that seems to have just left Pyongyang City, the soldier reported urgently. Hearing this, Yuan Hui lowered his eyes and sighed, another fleeing noble. The soldier immediately spoke up, no, the carriage bears the flag of Lai Di. The carriage in question was now rushing down the road. The sound of hoofbeats followed relentlessly in pursuit. Soon the carriage was surrounded by hundreds of cavalrymen. Imperial guards close in on the carriage, don't let a single arrow through. Wu Lu shouted the order. Behind the cavalry surrounding the carriage, another large group was watching. The deputy guard said loudly, General, please let me buy some time, you must go on ahead. Hearing this, Fu Lu immediately refused. What are you saying, no? But the man seemed to ignore him and shouted an order, 10 rearguard cavalrymen with me. Fu Lu called out in shock, deputy guard, but the horse galloped on without turning back, leading the rearguard cavalry straight ahead. The deputy guard's face was filled with a hard-to-read expression, then the corners of his mouth lifted into a smile. You must escort His Highness to safety. At that moment, the massive Tang army appeared right before them. One of them, riding a white horse at the front, quickly closed in and initiated the attack. The deputy guard gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with a furious desire to hold back and destroy the enemy troops. The man on the white horse easily took his opponent's life with a long spear. Before long, the Tang army had cleared away those who stood in their path. The army continued to charge forward, picking up speed. The man on the white horse leading them shouted, We're about to catch them! Up ahead, the Hei Jiagui Ma Dui urgently escorted the carriage forward. Wu Dei glanced back, calling out silently in his heart, "Deputy guard." When he turned back, his eyes were shut tight, his face showing the pain of loss. Suddenly, a sharp arrow flew before his eyes, passing inches from Wu Dei's pupil. It was so close that Wu Dei's startled eyes could be seen in its reflection. The arrow continued flying straight towards the back. It precisely pierced the left chest of the man on the white horse who was leading the pursuit. Just like that, the distance between the two sides was widened. The troops guarding the carriage quickly accelerated. The road beneath them was shrouded in dust from the speed of the iron-clad horses. Tears welled up in the corners of Wu Dei's eyes, and he bit his lip to keep from crying out. The troops continued to spur their horses onward. The carriage was at the center, escorted by a large contingent of troops. In the distance, the overwhelmingly numerous enemy force was still in pursuit. Zhen Tian suddenly stopped his horse, looking in astonishment at the person who appeared before him. He called out, "Headguard." Wu Dei on horseback also responded, "Great envoy." The horse's hooves moved quickly across the ground as Zhen Tian and Wu Dei turned to face back to back. Wu Dei lowered his head slightly, closing his eyes as if silently awaiting orders. Zhen Tian's brow tightened, and he hissed through his teeth, "All troops, slaughter them all, leave no one alive." The iron-clad horses flew across the ground like the wind. Without hesitation, they charged straight into the dense ranks of the enemy. The two sides crashed into each other, a scene of fierce and bloody combat. The convoy escorting the carriage was moving along a trail through the mountains and forests. Surrounding the carriage were soldiers holding spears and accompanying maids. Zhen Tian sat on his horse, his eyes gazing into the distance. His face was resolute, his eyes sharp and intensely focused. "Is it really an imperial edict?" Zhen Tian asked, still finding it hard to believe. Wu Dei confirmed with certainty. "Yes, His Majesty has ordered us to use the boats to escort His Highness the Crown Prince to safety." Yi Zhi was inside the gently rolling horse-drawn carriage. Zhen Tian gazed at the carriage as if confirming his important mission. With a resolute, emotionless face, Zhen Tian looked towards the distant lands ahead. The iron-armored horse's hooves stepped slowly across the ground. The light in the sky gradually dimmed the sunset, preparing to give way to the night, while on the ground the army moved slowly through the dense forest. Before the army were boats anchored and waiting at the end of the long path they were traveling. The boats had appeared, but they were still quite a distance from the army. Yuan Hui said to Zhen Tian, "At this pace, we'll probably arrive by dawn." Suddenly, a loud shout came from behind General. Zhen Tian turned his head to see a soldier rushing towards them, announcing loudly, "It's the enemy." Hearing the news, everyone looked down at the distant plain and saw a troop of enemy cavalry galloping towards them at full speed, kicking up clouds of dust. A group of enemy soldiers was riding towards them at high speed, the sound of their hooves cutting through the wind and creating a thick cloud of dust. "Damn it, those bastards tracked us down. Let me use my arrows to shatter their skulls." Hearing Yu Lu Fu Lu also spoke up, "Save some for me. Guima squad, follow me to hold off the Tang army. The rest of the troops will escort the Crown Prince." Zhen Tian commanded loudly, and the army immediately split into two groups as planned. The cavalry troop with long spears was charging forward at full speed. The leader shouted, "The Goguryeo army is over there." On Zhen Tian's side, the soldiers formed a long line, like a steel wall, preparing to face the battle. Zhen Tian glanced over, ordering Yu Lu to fire his arrows. Yu Lu, seated on his armored horse, heard the command and readied himself. In front of him, the enemy cavalry was charging forward like the wind. He began to raise his bow and draw the string. The soldiers behind him also raised their bows in unison and drew their strings taut. Yu Lu gave a confident smile as if to affirm his perfect marksmanship, 2 arrows in 1 shot. The first arrow was fired as the vanguard. Immediately after, a dense rain of arrows was released. The arrows flew down from above at extreme speeds, then pierced into the charging cavalry. Zhen Tian quickly spurred his horse and charged forward. Wu Dei and Fu Lu also spurred their horses onward. The army quickly charged forward to engage the enemy. Darts were thrown at the enemy, giving them no time to dodge. Zhen Tian used his weapon easily, taking down the enemies around him. Someone from a high place witnessed the chaotic battle, hundreds of soldiers fighting fiercely under the crimson sunset sky. That person was Zhong Xian. Behind him, more soldiers stood ready, awaiting orders. Near the carriage, the escorting soldiers were moving with great urgency. Inside the carriage, a gentle handmaiden held Yi Ji, who was wrapped in a cloth, amidst the shaking and the noise from outside. The handmaiden looked at the little girl sleeping soundly and said in a low voice, "It's all right, we're almost there." Suddenly, an arrow pierced through the roof of the carriage and landed right next to the little girl, causing the handmaiden's face to show clear panic and fear. Startled, she fell onto the carriage floor, looking at the arrow, and let out a terrified scream. Startled by the commotion, the sleeping girl burst into tears. Outside the carriage, a loud shout was heard. "The Tang army is also coming from the coast. Shield squad with me, block the front." The soldiers who received the order moved to the front of the carriage to form a shield, continuing towards the coast. As the carriage reached the coast, they saw soldiers straining to hold up large shields to block the rain of arrows pouring down. From a distance, a loud shout was heard, "Hold the formation." The soldiers tried to stand firm against the relentless barrage of arrows. In the distance, the Tang soldiers were also charging forward. The soldiers placed the shields, now bristling with arrows, on the ground. Everyone struggled together, trying to hold their position. "We have to hold them off until His Highness the Crown Prince is safely on the ship." A young man gripping his sword with both hands shouted defiantly, "Hold on until the Grand Emissary arrives." That was Kui Xiong Sen, a swordsman from Gao Guli. The Tang soldiers were already right in front of them. Xiong Sen, holding his blade, charged into the group of soldiers alone. While a battle raged on the coast inland, Zhong Xian led his army preparing to charge. He introduced himself, "I am Wei Zhongxian, Great General of the Great Tang's garrison army." Across from him, Zhen Tian just watched him in silence. Zhongxian offered a condition. "If you surrender now, I will personally report to His Majesty the Emperor and grant you the honor of fighting under my command for the Great Tang." "How about it?" he asked, looking at Zhen Tian with wide eyes. Zhen Tian just stared back at him without a word. A moment later, he nodded slightly, as if to agree. Zhongxian and his soldiers burst out laughing. "You've made the right choice. You will be my right hand." Before he could finish speaking, an arrow shot through his head. Wu Lu from behind Zhen Tian had taken the shot. The arrow pierced through his head and lodged in the chest of a soldier standing nearby. Wu Lu cursed, "You Tang army trash, you fight with your words." Fu Lu next to him added, "That bastard looked just like Li Shi-min." Zhong Xian fell from his horse, his body collapsing heavily onto the ground. Zhen Tian quietly ordered Yuan Hui advance. Yuan Hui tightened the grip on his weapon and yelled out to the entire army. The surrounding soldiers immediately readied themselves. Everyone raised their spears high, their faces filled with concentration. The order rang out, "Throw." Axes were unleashed, flying toward the enemy. Soldiers fell to the ground, their faces contorted in pain. One of them pried his eyes open, staring in shock at the sight before him. An armored horse leaped forward as if taking flight. A hoof came down on the soldier's face. Zhen Tian led the troops charging on horseback into the crowd of soldiers. On the coast, the Tang soldiers were now lying scattered all over the ground. Xiong Sen panted exhausted after the strenuous battle. He heard the sound of horse hooves in the distance. He saw that it was Zhen Tian and the He Gui Ma Dui. Xiong Sen immediately turned and shouted the news to his soldiers. Upon hearing the news, everyone cheered with joy. Someone shouted urgently, "The Tang army is coming after us. Everyone on the ships, get away as fast as you can." By the time the Tang army gave chase, everyone was already aboard the ships. They watched as the coastline grew farther away. The Tang soldiers on the shore became dark silhouettes against the purple sunset. Gentle waves lapped against the hull of the large wooden ship. The large white sails were raised, pushing the ship away from the shore and into the great sea. Yi Ji was sound asleep, her innocent face calm and peaceful. Zhen Tian held the little girl, looking down at the child with an expression full of complex emotions. He turned to ask Wu Dai what is His Highness the Crown Prince's name. He replied Lai Dai gave him the name Yi Qi. Zhen Tian continued to ask, "What are His Majesty's next orders?" Wu Dai suddenly looked down, remaining silent for a moment. He slowly closed his eyes as if facing a difficult question. Zhen Tian raised his voice, "Captain of the guard, where is His Majesty?" Wu Dai did not answer, but instead reached a hand into his sleeve. He took out a secret scroll and gave it to him. Lai Dai instructed the servant to relay this to you. Zhen Tian looked at the scroll held out before him, still holding Yi Ji in his arms. He handed the little girl to a servant girl and took the scroll with his free hand. He opened it and read the instructions written on it. "I give this final command to my younger brother. Zhen Tian read each line with a grim expression. Take this child and the remaining people far away and live a peaceful life. The boat was drifting on the calm sea, moving forward. Everyone looked towards the distant land. The soldiers on the boat were all covered in injuries, and exhaustion was clear on their faces. This was the final request from an older brother to his younger brother. Zhen Tian could almost see the face of Bao Zhangwang. The corners of his lips curved into a smile as he looked at him. After reading the instructions, his brows furrowed even more tightly. He crumpled the letter in his hand. The man I never dared to call my brother now calls himself my brother and tells me to run away. Zhen Tian turned to Wu De What about Pingrang Fortress head guard. The man just lowered his eyes in silence, not looking at him. Zhen Tian called him again in a louder voice. Head guard. Wu De immediately dropped to his knees. Please kill me. He said nothing, but his kneeling body trembled, and tears streamed down his old face. The scene seemed to freeze. Everything fell silent, leaving only an unspoken, unacceptable truth. Zhen Tian turned to look back at the place they had just left. His pupils contracted, his face darkened. Black smoke billowed from the island. 900 years of Goryeo ending like this? His gaze turned sharp and cold, yet filled with sorrow and self-blame. In the end, I couldn't protect it. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out, the sound of a large wave crashing against the side of the boat. The boat swayed, and waves began to splash onto the deck. A frightened handmaiden held Yi Zhi tightly in her arms. Zhen Tian stood on the boat, watching the large waves crash against it with increasing ferocity. Yi Zhi, who was fast asleep, was startled by the loud noise. The little girl immediately burst into tears, her cries echoing across the boat. Zhen Tian's face darkened even more, looking at Yi Zhi with a thoughtful expression. The white-sailed boat struggled to move as large waves blocked its bow. The sea grew rougher, causing the boat to sway even more violently. The sky filled with dark clouds, unleashing a heavy downpour. Lightning struck the stormy sea, creating more dangerous challenges for the boat. The once calm waves seemed to erupt in fury, making the boat tilt on the sea. The storm raged, and on deck the soldiers struggled to stay upright as towering waves threatened them relentlessly. Loud shouts rang out non-stop. Grab the ropes, stay alert. Do you want to die? Tie yourselves down. As the waves crashed more violently, the soldiers grew more panicked. One of the boats in the fleet was in danger of capsizing. The fleet captain rushed over to Zhen Tian, who was observing the situation from the sea. We have to turn the boat back. The demand was made as the boat tilted sharply. I've lived my whole life at sea, but I've never seen waves like this, the drenched fleet captain explained. Before he could finish, a giant wall of water appeared before them. A loud scream echoed. At this rate, we're all going to die. Zhen Tian heard him, but said nothing, still silently watching the raging sea. The fleet captain lowered his voice as if begging General turn the boat back quickly. Zhen Tian's face was splattered with water from the large waves. He lowered his eyes to look at the innocent face of Yi Zhi, who had a cheerful and naive smile. Zhen Tian spoke, his face resolute, his gaze fixed and calculating. In any case, we have no way back. As soon as he finished speaking, a distant lightning bolt flashed, illuminating his highly focused face. He looked towards the distant lightning and slowly gave the command through the waves forward. This is the will of Emperor Lai Di. His hand tightened on the sword at his hip. And it is the battle of the great Goguryeo Navy. He drew his sword, stood on the bow, and raised it high, pointing it at the dark sky that was relentlessly striking down with lightning. Yi Zhi was in his arms. Everyone present was focused, listening for his command. Zhen Tian pointed his sword forward and shouted, pierce through the wall of waves. The great ship charged forward, undeterred by the relentless assault of the massive waves. The other ships also sailed together into the giant waterspout. Before the ship's bow was a pillar of water like a giant monster. The whirlpools in the sea seemed ready to sweep the ships away at any moment. The ship struggled amidst the roaring ocean and the relentless waves. A patch of light appeared in the middle of the ocean, bringing a glimmer of hope. The light grew larger and larger like a gateway to a new land. Zhen Tian slowly opened his eyes, his face dotted with water. It was unclear if it was seawater or sweat. He called out softly, "Crown Prince." He leaned on his sword to force himself to stand, breathing with great difficulty. Bu Zhi was still held securely in his arms. Zhen Tian suddenly heard laughter and immediately looked down. Lying in his arms, Bu Zhi let out a cheerful giggle. For a moment, Zhen Tian still couldn't shake off his shock. The captain stood by the ship's rail looking down at the calm water and stammered, "What is happening?" Uncertain, he continued, "We should still be far from the mainland." Wu Lu suddenly appeared and spoke up. "For it to be this quiet, the storm must have passed. This sudden silence is terrifying." Then, looking confused, he asked the person next to him, "If we've sighted land, shouldn't we be docking quickly? Why do you look so dazed? Did you get hit by an arrow?" The fleet captain pointed toward the land before them and said, "Over there." Wu Lu replied, "That's right, the scenery is beautiful. This land is truly vast. You can turn in a circle and still only see land." His excited expression turned serious as he noticed something strange. Why is the sea so narrow? There was land not far ahead of them and also land behind them. Chen Tian voiced his speculation, "Is this a lake?" Hearing this, Wu Lu angrily grabbed the fleet captain in a headlock. "Are you crazy? Have we been going in circles in a lake for days? You bastard, do I have to wring your neck to wake you up?" Yuan Hui tried to intervene, but Wu Lu's anger had not subsided. "Brother Yuan Hui, how can we let this idiot get away with this?" Yuan Hui turned to ask Chen Tian, Great Envoy, "What should we do? This place is clearly a lake, and we departed from the sea." Chen Tian analyzed, "In any case, this is a place very far from where we started. Then this place is safe." Hearing Chen Tian, Yuan Hui looked at him with some surprise. Yuan Hui approached the fleet captain, who was still in Wu Lu's tight headlock, and ordered him to command the entire fleet to land. The order rang out, "All troops make landfall." The white sails were furled, and the fleet began to advance toward the land ahead. Chen Tian stared straight ahead, his brow tightly furrowed, unable to help but wonder, where on earth is this place? The sky above was clear and blue as the ships pulled into shore. On the vast land, soldiers set up camps, and everyone was busy working together. Wu Lu, take some men and scout the surrounding area," Chen Tian commanded with a serious face. The two of them immediately adopted serious expressions, clasping their fists to accept the order. Chen Tian continued giving orders, "Prepare for any potential attacks, set up a defensive perimeter around the area." Yuan Hui bowed in obedience, accepting his task. "Headguard, check our current manpower." Wu De heard the order and responded, accepting the assigned mission. After the assignments were given, everyone dispersed to begin their work. Chen Tian stood with a serious expression, observing the soldiers. Wu Lu and Wu Lu set off together, carrying axes. Yuan Hui gathered the soldiers and assigned them their duties. Wu De went to check on and talk with the soldiers. Suddenly a cry rang out. Chen Tian turned towards the sound, a gentle smile spreading across his face. Inside, 3 handmaidens were busy trying to soothe Yi Ji. Chen Tian lifted the flap and entered the tent, much to the surprise of the palace maids. The 3 of them quickly bowed to him in greeting. Chen Tian looked down at them and said, "I am not a prince." The 3 palace maids were flustered, and one of them stammered, "Then please excuse us." Chen Tian remained standing there and asked, "What is the matter?" The palace maid holding Yi Ji respectfully explained, "It seems she has soiled herself." Chen Tian's expression was a little thoughtful as he replied, "Is that so?" Yi Ji wouldn't stop crying, and Chen Tian's presence only made the palace maids more anxious. Chen Tian quickly strode closer to the group. As he approached the palace, maids looked at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Change her diaper, Chen," Tian ordered coldly, his eyes lowered to the constantly crying Yi Ji. Hearing him speak, the 3 palace maids' faces were filled with shock and apprehension. In the end, the 3 of them had to change the diaper under the watchful eye of Chen Tian, who stood behind them. Lying on the cloth, Yi Ji continued to cry loudly. Chen Tian watched the little girl intently, his expression changing to one of utter astonishment. His pupils constricted, his brows furrowed in complete shock. "Get the headguard in here!" His loud shout echoed throughout the camp. The call for the headguard rang out urgently, a response to Chen Tian's rage. Deep inside the dense forest, Fu Lu and Wu Lu's group advanced. Fu Lu spoke up in dissatisfaction, "I swear I saw a wild boar just a moment ago." Wu Lu frowned and shot back, "I can't even see an ant. What wild boar are you talking about?" Fu Lu also frowned and replied, "This kid has no respect when talking to his big brother." Walking behind him, Wu Lu shouted angrily, "Are you trying to act smart again?" Fu Lu said as he walked, "We came out of the same place, so of course the one who came out first is the big brother." Suddenly a sound came from the bushes. Wu Lu turned to look. "Did you hear that?" Fu Lu gripped the axe in his hand and ordered everyone focus. The soldiers immediately readied their weapons. The sound from the bushes continued. Wu Lu and Fu Lu looked at each other curiously. "We're having wild boar tonight," Fu Lu said with an eager grin. From the bushes the sound grew louder. Everyone raised their weapons ready for a fight. From within the bushes a large green foot stepped out. Fu Lu, Wu Lu, and the soldiers who had their weapons drawn suddenly froze their faces, showing expressions of astonishment. Wu Lu lowered his drawn bow, looking at the creature before him in confusion. What is this? This wild boar walks on two legs. Before them were four large individuals, green-skinned, with pointed ears, tusks, and snouts that resembled wild boars, but they walked on two legs. Fu Lu observed them, and then asked, "And why are they so green?" "Can't you tell just by looking?" Wu Lu turned to him, his face clearly angry. He continued, "They're all bruised up." Fu Lu raised the axe in his hand, looking at Wu Lu with a face full of doubt and confusion. Who cares if it walks on two legs or is bright green as long as the boar is tasty? Hearing that, Fu Lu immediately agreed, "You've got a point there." The wild boar-like monsters had heads full of question marks. A foot gently stepped through the grass towards the opponent. Fu Lu and Wu Lu slowly advanced their faces, bearing excited and amused smiles. Seeing their expressions, the group of green-skinned monsters grew terrified. The green grass underfoot was trampled mercilessly, giving Fu Lu and Wu Lu the momentum to launch themselves into the air, raising their weapons to close in for an attack. The four green-skinned monsters looked at the two of them with eyes full of fear. The dense green forest canopy was torn apart by a piercing scream that echoed across the sky. Inside the camp, beads of sweat dotted a palace maid's face, her eyes wide with terror. She breathed heavily, frozen still by the sword held to her neck. Jen Tian held the sword, pointing it straight at the palace maid with a cold, sharp gaze. Wu Dai rushed in from outside with a panicked expression, grand emissary. The scene before him left him stunned. Jen Tian glanced at him and said coldly, "Headguard, the child has been swapped." But no one here could explain what happened. The three palace maids were terrified of Jen Tian's wrath. Wu Dai was silent. He understood what had happened. He quickly dropped to his knees, bowing his head respectfully as if to apologize. Then he quietly reached into his robe. Jen Tian turned his head to see Wu Dai presenting a scroll with both hands. Jen Tian looked down at the scroll, frowning as he asked, "What is this?" "This is another letter from His Majesty Emperor Lai. He instructed me to deliver it once we settled at our destination." Wu Dai replied with his head bowed respectfully. Jen Tian sheathed his sword. There were two letters. Wu Dai, still kneeling with his head lowered, said, "My sincerest apologies." Yes, there were. Jen Tian reached out and took the letter from his hand. He unrolled it and read the contents. His brows furrowed tightly. The letter read per Bao Zhangwang's instructions. Yi Zhi is not the crown prince. She is the daughter of Yi Liu Huan, the deputy guard who stayed behind in the city to protect me. I felt the child's life was too short to be left in a place that would be burned to the ground. Therefore I have sent her to you. I'm sorry for deceiving you. There was no other way. If I hadn't done this, you would have thrown away your own life to protect the country. I did not want to be so cruel to you, one born of Emperor Lai's bloodline, who has spent his entire life on the battlefield. Reading this, Jen Tian's brows furrowed even more. He gritted his teeth. The letter continued telling him not to blame himself for failing to protect the country. Bao Zhangwang had chosen his own end. When the enemy army entered, he was sitting on his throne as if he had long awaited them, with only 3 guards remaining to protect him. The Tang soldiers lined up, drawing their bows and aiming at the 3 guards. The 3 men frowned, staring intently at the enemies before them, their eyes filled with despair. The next moment, the 3 guards became like giant porcupines riddled with arrows. Bao Zhangwang consoled Jen Tian with the one who ascended to the throne of Emperor Lai through a coup am the one who must bear this sin. After finishing off the last of them, the Tang soldiers approached him. Bao Zhangwang sat on the throne and gently closed his eyes, as if accepting what was to come his entire life, having been nothing more than a puppet for power. Grand emissary, do not live as I have. Live according to your own will. Before him, an enemy soldier raised his blade high. Before the blade fell, Bao Zhangwang opened his eyes. He looked straight at the enemy, his gaze empty, yet holding a hint of relief, followed by a sharp sound and a splash of crimson blood. Jen Tian silently read each line of the letter. Ah, that's right. As he read this line, his eyes lit up slightly. The final words Bao Zhangwang said to him were, "I hope that child grows up healthy and becomes your life partner." Wu Dai looked at Zhen Tian, his eyes filled with complex emotions, listening silently as he continued. "He has granted me freedom." Zhen Tian stood there clutching the scroll, his back firm yet solitary. Everyone silently bowed their heads. Zhen Tian turned his face to look at Yi Zhi. The baby girl in the palace maid's arms broke into a happy smile. Zhen Tian looked down at her. His large hand reached out, and as it gently touched the baby, Yi Zhi's big round eyes widened in surprise. Curious about the strange feeling, her small pale hand reached up and grabbed Zhen Tian's finger. His eyes widened, his expression one of slight surprise. Yi Zhi's two small hands grasped two of his fingers, and she giggled happily. Zhen Tian turned his back and spoke, "Change her diapers." The palace maid holding Yi Zhi was a bit surprised, but she quickly obeyed. Zhen Tian walked over to the still kneeling Wu Dai and asked, "What about the child's mother?" Wu Dai lowered his head and replied, "She said she would stay to protect the city with her husband Yi Liu Huan." Hearing this, Zhen Tian fell silent. He looked down at Wu Dai, his sharp gaze now filled with concern. He silently walked past the kneeling Wu Dai, pushed aside the tent flap, and went outside. Outside, everyone was still busy with their tasks. Zhen Tian gazed into the distance as a gust of wind blew past him. His heart was filled with uncertainty. What am I supposed to do now? At 6, I picked up a sword and charged onto the battlefield at 16. When they abandoned their homeland and fled, I fought on the front lines because the duty of one born of the late emperor's illegitimate bloodline was to protect the dynasty. He stood by the lake gazing at the clear blue water, but now that reason for his existence was gone. Zhen Tian stood there from when the water was clear and blue until it was tinted with the colors of sunset. He gazed into the distance, wondering to himself, "What do I wield my sword for now?" Inside the tent, a small warm fire was blazing. A voice called out, "What's the situation?" Fu Lu reported, "We've searched the entire surrounding forest. There are no enemy troops." Wu Lu added, "The atmosphere here feels different from the Tang or Silla, and some of the trees look a little strange." But he paused for a moment before continuing. "The strangest thing is the green pigs that walk on two legs." Suddenly a soldier burst in, calling out urgently, "General!" Wu Dai shouted, "What's going on during a meeting? Have the enemy appeared?" The soldier, panting and stammering, replied, "It seems the sky is angry." Wu Dai furrowed his brow in disbelief and questioned him loudly. Everyone quickly exited the tent to see for themselves. The soldier pointed to the starry sky over there. Everyone looked up in the direction the soldier was pointing. They all wore the same expression of utter astonishment. A murmur went through the crowd. The moon is giving birth, and to twins no less. They saw not only a large round moon in the sky, but also two smaller orbs right next to it, glowing with a similar light. The stars are completely different too. It's like we're in another world. Zhen Tian was standing right there. He followed their gaze and replied, "Is that so? At least now we don't have to worry about the Tang army." Hearing him say this, a flustered Yuan Hui quickly added, "Yes, that's true." But before he could finish, Zhen Tian cut him off. "All right." That night, everyone set up camp to rest in the clearing. Early the next morning, a roar echoed through the camp. A monster charged straight into their tent. Fu Lu rushed out to intercept it. At the same time, Zhen Tian was also stepping out of his tent. His eyes darted over, watching them intently. The monster quickly broke free from Fu Lu and Wu Lu's grasp. Then it charged toward where Zhen Tian was standing. The two were alarmed that it had gotten away, and Fu Lu shouted, "Where is that thing going?" With that, they both leaped forward to catch it again. They pinned the creature firmly to the ground, saying, "Got you, you green pig!" They started hitting it while yelling, "Stay still!" Zhen Tian stood frozen in place, his brow furrowed. Pigs here walk on two legs. Then he watched Fu Lu and Wu Lu beating the creature and thought, or is it a person disguised as a pig? The monster frantically screamed, "Humans, wait! Let me talk!" Wu Lu asked doubtfully, "That's strange, these pigs sound like they're talking like people." Fu Lu replied, "What are you saying? Have you ever seen a pig talk before? Just get it over with already." Hearing this, Fu Lu started tickling the monster's armpit. Being tickled, it couldn't stop laughing and said, "Human, just kill us with a sword." Finding it too noisy, Fu Lu punched it hard in the ribs. Yuan Hui walked out of the tent and stood beside Zhen Tian. Seeing him approach, he asked, "What are they doing?" Yuan Hui gave a wry smile and replied, "They're making a sacrifice." Zhen Tian asked doubtfully, "A sacrifice, but why are they tickling a pig?" He answered uncertainly, "Maybe it's better if the offering is smiling." Fu Lu over there yelled, "Wu Lu, what are you doing? Tickle it properly. We have to cut its throat while it's laughing. Now it's crying." Zhen Tian shouted to stop them. "Fu Lu, Wu Lu, stop it!" Fu Lu asked in confusion, "Why, great envoy? We need to make the sacrifice and then use it for food." He replied, "The sacrifice can wait. Besides a pig that green might be sick." From a distance, someone ran in hurriedly to report, "General, we have a problem." Fu Lu asked curiously, "What is it this time? Is it a dog or a cow walking on two legs again?" After hearing him, the newcomer snapped his head up and asked, "How did you know?" Hearing that, the other four looked on with doubtful expressions. In the distance, a cow broke through the fence and charged in. It let out a loud roar, preparing to attack them. The soldiers grabbed their weapons, ready to charge. Seeing the giant cow charging at them, they froze. "What is that thing?" They stood rooted to the spot and hastily said, "Why is a cow walking on two legs?" The cow tightened its grip on the axe in its hand and swung it down. The soldiers raised their shields in unison to block the massive axe. The cow swung its axe straight up again, sending the soldiers flying. From the rear, Wu Dai ordered the soldiers to charge. He shouted loudly, ordering the charging men to throw their axes at the roaring cow. Caught off guard, it was hit by the attack. It staggered back a few steps. Its eyes were bloodshot with rage. It raised its axe high again and brought it down. Suddenly, grappling hooks shot straight towards it. Two hooks latched firmly onto its horns. Held fast, it let out a crazed roar. Fu Lu held the rope tightly and cursed, "What is this godforsaken place?" Wu Lu responded, "What are you doing? Can't you see it's immobilized? Shoot it with arrows now." The cow roared loudly again and charged forward, trying to break free from the rope. Fu Lu gripped the rope in his hand and said, "Is it trying to match our strength?" Beside him, Wu Lu also had a determined look in his eyes. The two of them yanked the cow backward. Seizing the opportunity, Wu Lu quickly ordered the soldiers behind them to fire their bows. They drew their bows in unison and fired. It was hit by a rain of arrows and let out a roar. Its body was now covered in wounds, the bone-deep pain forcing it to its knees. Fu Lu tightened his grip on his axe and charged forward, swinging it down hard on the cow's head. That one simple move was enough to finish it off. The cow's head rolled over to where the soldiers were standing. Everyone around stared at the scene in stunned silence. Ignoring his disheveled appearance, Fu Lu slung the axe over his shoulder. He spoke Wu Lu. "I bet this ox is good to eat, right?" Fu Lu replied, "I doubt Dashije would stop us." He looked behind Fu Lu and his heart skipped a beat. He saw the three charging oxen and shouted, "What is this?" Now there are three more of them. There are dogs too. From behind, several dogs rushed forward. The lead ox saw the corpse of its fallen comrade lying on the ground. Filled with fury, they shot forward like arrows. Fu Lu charged forward, saying, "Wu Lu, let's split up and handle them." He followed behind and shouted, "Then who takes the third one?" The two of them bickered as they charged forward. The ox swung its axe, chopping down towards Fu Lu's head. He struggled to block the giant axe over his head. Nearby, Wu Lu gracefully dodged past the sharp axe blade. The dogs rushed right past the two of them and headed for the soldiers. The last ox tightened its grip on its axe, preparing for a sneak attack. Seeing this, Zhen Tian hurriedly rushed towards them. He slashed at the arm of the one holding the axe. The sharp blade sliced through its arm, and the overwhelming pain made it roar endlessly. Zhen Tian landed lightly behind it, his face grim and his brows knitted together. Fu Lu knocked away the axe that was hovering over his head. He then lowered his stance to attack his sharp axe slicing through the air. He brought his axe down on the ox with all his strength. Then Fu Lu furrowed his brow and let out a loud laugh right in the middle of the battlefield. From behind, Wu Lu drew his bow and shot at the last ox, which upon being hit, furiously swung its axe down. He leaped lightly into the air, preparing to fire another arrow. It was struck by the arrow, stumbling back several steps. Then, in great pain, it collapsed to the ground. Having finished it off, Wu Lu landed lightly on the ground. After dealing with the oxen, the three of them looked at each other. Zhen Tian asked Yuan Hui with some confusion, "My body feels lighter. Do you know why?" Yuan Hui immediately explained to them, "The gravitational pull is weaker in this place. Because of that, the weight of your armor, weapons, and even your bodies is lighter than usual." After hearing his explanation, Zhen Tian nodded with a frown, showing he understood. He then glanced around, assessing the situation, and said, "So that's why." Suddenly, the ox behind Zhen Tian stirred and began to get up. It swung its arm down hard, attempting a sneak attack. Its fist slammed into the ground, causing it to crack. The ox clenched its fist and furrowed its brow. It then tensely lifted its hand from the ground, its jaw dropping in shock when it saw he had dodged the blow. From behind, Zhen Tian slashed down at the ox. He then did a stylish spin and sheathed his blade. He clicked his tongue and said, "If things are like this, Lu Yuetang is no match for me at all. What a shame." Elsewhere, the soldiers were busy finishing off the dogs. They took them down cleanly one by one. Seeing their pack being taken down, the remaining dogs hastily fled. They watched them go, not intending to give chase. Zhen Tian commanded Fu Lu chase them down and wipe them out and expand the search area to see what else is out there. The scene shifts to the dense forest on the other side. Two people were panicking and fleeing in the forest. Those two were Sarah and Varan. They were terrified, and Varan hastily said Sarah go back to the village. Sarah called his name confused. He was sweating bullets, raised his bow, and shouted at Sarah, "Hurry up." Hearing him, she shook her head nonstop. Varan tensed up and aimed his bow at the bushes in front of him. The bushes on the other side rustled nonstop as if something was about to emerge. A giant destroyed the path wherever it walked. That thing roared loudly at the two of them. Varan shot an arrow in its direction and shouted, "Over here, you stupid ogre." The arrow he shot did nothing to that thing. He grit his teeth in fear and cursed, "Damn it." Then he frantically looked back at Sarah. Sarah run. She didn't know what to do, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked at him. Then she hastily fled from that place. While running, she carelessly tripped on a rock in front of her. Sarah stumbled, lost her balance, and fell flat on the ground. Seeing this, the giant ogre approached her. Varan stood there confused, not knowing what to do, sweating profusely and trembling all over. He came to his senses and quickly shot an arrow that way, shouting, "You damn ogre over here, eat this." That thing ignored him and reached out to grab Sarah. Suddenly, someone rushed towards them. Before the ogre could grab Sarah, she was rescued by that person. The one who had just rushed in to save her was Fu Lao. Sarah had her eyes shut tight when she suddenly heard Fu Lao's voice. "What is that thing? It's even bigger than a cow." She peeked open her eyes to look at the person who had just saved her from death. The two of them stared at each other in astonishment without blinking. Sarah looked at Fu Lao, stammering, unable to speak. In contrast, Fu Lao laughed heartily and said, "That was dangerous, little miss." Seeing his bright smile, she couldn't help but let out a sound. After hearing Sarah, Fu Lao asked in confusion, "What are you?" Her eyes suddenly widened in terror. She pointed behind him and screamed, "Get out of the way!" The ogre slammed its fist right down on them. After that punch, a massive shockwave erupted where they were. Fu Lao carried Sarah and dashed out of there, then gently set her down on the ground. She didn't have time to think, still staring at him in a daze. Her clear eyes were completely filled with Fu Lao's reflection. Then he rushed back towards the ogre. He tightened his grip on the axe in his hand, preparing to attack. Fu Lao swung his axe up and brought it straight down on the creature's head. Varan's jaw dropped and he ran in a panic to Sarah's side. In just one move, Fu Lao had cleanly dealt with the ogre. Varan, amazed, began to exclaim. He took care of the ogre in a single blow. After splitting the creature in two, Fu Lao calmly sat on the ground. Then he stood up, intending to leave. Suddenly, his eyes shifted, and he saw the other two standing off to the side. So Fu Lao neatly smoothed back the hair at his temples. Then he said to them coolly, "I am Fu Lao. Are you okay?" Varan and Sarah were astonished, their eyes wide with admiration. Then they both dropped to their knees and kowtowed, "Pardon us, and thank you, Lord Burritoct." Fu Lu was extremely surprised, asking them doubtfully, "You know my name." A moment later, he led the two of them back to his camp. The people in the camp stared at them curiously. Varan shook Sarah gently to comfort her. "Don't be afraid, I will definitely protect you." She glanced around and then replied shyly, "I'm all right. I'm injured and can't move anyway. You should run back to the village and tell everyone." Varan broke into a sweat and said, "What are you talking about? How could I leave you behind?" Then someone outside asked, "What are you two talking about?" The one who spoke was Fu Lu. He stepped inside, staring at them. Seeing them speaking a language he couldn't understand, he continued, "Say something I can understand." Meanwhile, Varan whispered, "It's all right. Isn't there a saying that even if you're dragged away by orcs, you can survive if you're clever?" The soldiers chattered excitedly. "Look at the blonde hair. How can someone have such fair skin? Are all the locals this beautiful? I heard Westerners look like this, so does that mean this is the West? Sarah whispered, could these be soldiers from the conquering army? Varan was alarmed. That can't be. There are no soldiers in the kingdom with black hair and eyes. Fu Lu frowned deeply as he watched the two of them whispering. His eyes were fixed on Sarah's face. He turned back and shouted, what are you all looking at? Get back! Hearing this, the soldiers quickly backed away. Suddenly, someone entered the tent and spoke to Fu Lu. It seems they are locals. Seeing Zhen Tian and Yuan Hui enter, Fu Lu greeted them great envoy. He walked over to him and asked curiously, do they understand our language? Fu Lu replied, I told them my name, but I couldn't understand anything they said. Zhen Tian felt someone staring from behind. He quickly turned to look behind him. Behind him, soldiers were clearing the battlefield outside. Watching them herd the pigs away, he thought, we still have no idea where we are. Besides the pigs and cattle, we need to find out what else exists here. Unknown dangers could threaten our survival, so we need to get information about this place from them. Zhen Tian was lost in thought and muttered to himself, to do that, we'll have to communicate. Varen and Sarah stared at them doubtfully. Zhen Tian turned to reassure the others. There must be a way. After hearing him, Yuan Hui thought for a moment and then mumbled, a way to communicate. Fu Lu suddenly thought of something and exclaimed. He beamed and laughed loudly, then said, I have a way. Someone from outside slowly walked into the tent. Fu Lu introduced him to everyone in the tent. This is my adjutant. But he has a sharp mind, and they say he knows every language, so let him give it a try. Xiang Shen entered the tent, bowing to greet everyone. Your subordinate, Kui Xiang Shen. He's the one who knows every language. Zhen Tian asked Fu Lu doubtfully, is that true? Xiang Shen quickly spoke up. I traveled with my parents to trade in the West, so I can speak their languages. Hearing his confident reply, Zhen Tian ordered, then try speaking with them. Xiang Shen was fired up, thinking to himself, this is my chance to prove my worth. He had traveled to many places from Dajian to Weikai. He was confident that having been all over the world, he could translate this language. Xiang Shen looked at Sarah and thought, this means there isn't a single language I don't know. The corners of his mouth stretched into a wide grin. Sarah stood in front of him, looking confused. Xiang Shen grinned gleefully and began to greet her. She couldn't understand what he was saying and backed away, leaving them both standing there awkwardly. He finally sighed. I guess that's not it. Xiang Shen switched to a cheerful expression, greeting her in another language. Sarah's face darkened, still not understanding anything, looking utterly confused. He glanced at Zhen Tian, who was staring intently, and gave a forced smile. Let me try a cheek kiss greeting. Xiang Shen moved closer, intending to kiss her cheek. Fu Lu yelled out in annoyance, what do you think you're doing? Zhen Tian's face darkened, glaring at him furiously. Seeing this, Xiang Shen's heart skipped a beat in terror. After that, he tried all sorts of different greetings, but still had no luck. Fu Lu punched Xiang Shen hard on the head to stop him. He scratched his head in embarrassment, then turned to explain to Zhen Tian, my apologies, great envoy. He sighed and replied, I forgot that I can't trust you, Fu Lu, with anything other than fighting. Fu Lu laughed loudly from behind and said, what's this? Wu Lu, tell this fraud not to use the Yi Ji surname anymore. It's a disgrace. Wu Lu's expression turned grim as he pushed Xiang Shen's head down. He quickly said, Lord Wu Lu, please give me a chance. He cut him off. Today I will personally oversee your training, so you'd better be prepared, you liar. Xiang Shen continued to cry out after them, Ni hao, miss with the blonde hair, please answer me. Fu Lu gritted his teeth, calling Xiang Shen's name, calling him a liar. Everyone in the tent watched this scene in awkward silence. Yuan Hui turned to look at Zhen Tian and spoke up. Let me give it a try. He gently walked over to Sarah and knelt down. He pointed to himself and clearly enunciated his name, Yuan Hui Jialan. Fearing she didn't understand, he repeated it again, one syllable at a time. Sarah seemed to understand and said cheerfully, Your name is Yuan Hui Jialan. He looked at her intently and then asked, Then may I ask what your name is, miss? Sarah asked again, questioningly, as if to confirm what he had just asked. She pointed to herself and said her name loudly, Sarah. Everyone around let out an excited, oh, whispering to each other, so her name is Sarah. A loud laugh echoed through the tent, drawing everyone's attention. On the other side, Fu Lu was laughing loudly. Is that all? I already knew her name. She even called my name twice. Fu Lu! Sarah pointed to herself and said, Thank you, sir. Thank you. He replied gallantly, "You remember well." Jen Tian asked him doubtfully, "It seems like you're just making things up, aren't you?" Yuan Hui gave a strained smile. "Just let him be, it's fine." He stood up and said to everyone in the tent, "That's all for today." After that, everyone left the tent one by one. Varen and Sarah watched them leave in confusion. Varan cried silently to himself and sighed, "I'm here too." That evening, the scene shifts to a nearby military camp. Guards were stationed around the camp. The commander of that camp sat quietly eating dinner alone. He cut a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. That man is Baron Anvin, a knight of the Heian Kingdom. The person next to him is Hilary Tillman, also from the Heian Kingdom. Suddenly, a soldier ran in from outside to report, "My Lord Baron, the mercenaries are about to take control of the village." He wiped his mouth and asked those insects they dare to flee from the kingdom. Then he gritted his teeth and said, "I will make them pay the price." The scene changes to the tent of Jen Tian's group. He scooped up a spoonful of soup, ate it, and then asked, "Are they leaving tomorrow?" Yuan Hui, who was standing nearby, heard his question and answered, "Yes, General." For some reason, Sarah gets along really well with Fu Lu and Wu Lu, so we decided to let her come along. Jen Tian added while eating, "She is pure, and he is simple, so they're two of a kind." Yuan Hui sensed the hidden meaning in his words, and flustered was about to ask again. Suddenly, a voice from outside caught his attention. "I have arrived." The ones standing outside the tent were Fu Lu and Sarah. Jen Tian's words echoed in Yuan Hui's mind. He looked at Sarah, who was flashing a pure smile. Then his eyes shifted to Fu Lu, a simple man. After that, he let out an embarrassed chuckle. Jen Tian gave him an order. "Go to the village and help them and make sure they understand that we come in peace." Fu Lu enthusiastically pointed to himself and replied, "Understood, you can count on me." He thought for a moment, then frowned and stared at him. Then he sighed and continued, "No head guard Wu Lu will go with you, so cooperate well." Hearing this, Fu Lu looked over in astonishment. He asked doubtfully, "Why the sudden change? You don't trust me." Jen Tian answered his question without a change in expression. "That's not it. Just focus on taking care of that child and make sure you leave a good impression. And Wu Lu has to organize the information from that person named Varan, so I've arranged for the head guard to go with you." After hearing the explanation, Fu Lu let out an "oh" and said, "So that's what it meant. Gosh, I thought you didn't trust me. I understand now." Watching him laugh so heartily, Jen Tian felt tired. He sighed softly and thought to himself, "Outside of combat, I really can't trust him with anything." A while later, Fu Lu was escorting Sarah and Varan home. They and the soldiers marched slowly along the trail. Wu Lu at the front was recalling the scene from earlier. Jen Tian had ordered him, and Fu Lu, the head guard, has a lot of work to do in the camp, so you two should go. The two of them were extremely excited and quickly replied, "Please don't worry." Then they both left the tent laughing and talking, leaving Jen Tian behind with a helpless expression. Back in the present, they were using the pigs from this morning to pull the carts. The pigs were sweating from pulling the heavy vehicles. Wu Lu was on a cart watching them to prevent any trouble. Behind him was Fu Lu on horseback with Sarah. Further back was the large militant troop of soldiers. The soldier in the lead spotted the village and quickly reported village sighted over there. Upon receiving the information, Wu Lu ordered the group behind him, "Everyone halt." Then he turned his head to look for Xiong Sen. "Hey, you liar." Being called out so suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He mumbled in protest, "I'm not a liar. I did learn the language in 10 days. Wu Lu said through gritted teeth, "So my 10 days of hellish training were just a bonus, I suppose." Hearing him say that, Xiong Sen's face turned pale. He continued, "Enough, hurry up and ask if this is the right village." Receiving the order, he quickly turned back to ask Varan. They then spoke for a while in another language. Varan pointed forward and said, "Xiong Sen, the villagers will surely be surprised, so let me and Sarah go ahead to explain." After getting the answer, he bowed his head in thanks. Suddenly, an axe came flying straight at his head. Fu Lu shouted at Xiong Shen, "You punk, do you think you're on my level? How dare you talk to me like that?" He was hit so hard his head was spinning. He then hurriedly explained in a loud voice, "But that word actually means thank you." Fu Lu slapped him again. "This little brat still dares to speak so informally." Xiong Shen was beaten so much he started wailing. Wu Lu quickly stopped him. "That's enough, Fu Lu, you're scaring the child." He looked towards a stunned Sarah and continued, "Look, you're frightening Sarah." Hearing that, Fu Lu turned to check on her. Seeing her looking dumbfounded, he flashed a bright smile. Seeing this, she smiled back, thinking to herself, so saying thank you gets you a beating. I'll have to warn everyone when we get to the village. The scene changes to the gate of Sarah's village. Varen and the other man rode ahead to the village to announce their arrival. Upon arriving, he gently helped Sarah off the horse. As he entered the village, he didn't see anyone and asked with suspicion, "Where is everybody?" Sarah glanced around and then froze. She pointed towards a source of light and said, "There in the square." The two of them cautiously made their way there. On the way, they looked around but didn't see a single person. Varen sensed something strange and stopped in his tracks. He quickly pulled Sarah back and hid in a secluded corner. He signaled for her to stay quiet and observe the situation. Varan's eyes were fixed on the square. The village chief was kneeling before Murin. He asked earnestly, "What is the meaning of this? Captain Murin promised to drive away the Orlando, but then you took all our money and food." After hearing him speak, he crouched down slightly. Then he said arrogantly, "This so-called village chief doesn't know a thing about the world. Are you just naive because you're a peasant, or are you just slow because you're old?" He looked at the people behind him with contempt and continued, "Why should we risk our lives fighting orcs? We can make a fortune just by capturing all of you." The soldiers under Murin's command exuded a brutal aura. He shouted his orders, "Don't harm the women, and as for the men, just don't cripple them. Kill anyone who isn't valuable." Wretched cries echoed throughout the village. The villagers scattered like a disturbed anthill. A woman holding a child quickly begged, "Please at least spare our children." Seeing her pleas, the soldier stopped his eyes, scanning the woman's body. Then he approached her with a lustful look in his eyes. He said, "That depends on what you're willing to do." With that, he grabbed her arm. He then tried to drag her away to do something horrible. The village chief collapsed as he watched the chaotic scene. He panicked and tried to rush forward to stop him. "You scoundrels, no!" Before he could do anything, he was pinned to the ground by Murin. He said village chief isn't living as a slave better than being eaten by orcs. The village chief lay on the ground, powerless to move. Looking at the chaos in his village, he felt utterly helpless. A feeling of uselessness at being unable to protect everyone washed over him. He thought to himself that to escape the kingdom's cruelty, he came all this way to be a farmer, but he was too trusting, and this is what happened. "Varen, Sarah, you absolutely must not come here. At the very least, you two must be safe." Elsewhere, Varen was covering Sarah's mouth to keep her from making a sound, gritting his teeth in anguish at the scene before him. Sarah was flustered, not knowing what to do next. Varen then told her, "Sarah, go quickly and report this to those people." She asked him worriedly, "Then what about you, uncle?" Varen looked at her with determination and said, "I will buy as much time as I possibly can." Sarah avoided his gaze, wanting to argue against his idea. Suddenly, she looked behind Varen, too terrified to speak. Behind him, one of Murin's soldiers had found the two of them. The man flashed a twisted smile and said, "Looks like there are still a few little rats." Sarah and Varen were now sprawled on the ground. Varen's face was covered in countless wounds. The village chief reached out in agony, trying to get to him. Just then, the large man was reporting, "We found them behind the fence, Captain." After hearing this, Murin smiled and ordered, "Deal with it yourself." He then became excited. "Get her up now, come here." Varen immediately lunged forward, trying to stop the large man. A second later, he was kicked hard by the man. As Sarah was dragged away, she screamed desperately, "Uncle." At that moment, the large man's entire body began to tremble violently. She stared blankly, witnessing this scene with her own eyes, because something had shot toward him. A second later, the large man's entire body collapsed to the ground. Murin was startled and confused, not understanding what was happening. Very quickly, he saw someone approaching on horseback from a distance. Murin couldn't believe his eyes and blurted out, "A guy on a horse." Everyone around was also extremely surprised, wondering where Fu Lu had appeared from with such a large axe. Meanwhile, the horse he controlled slowly came to a stop, and Fu Lu dismounted with great arrogance. He walked up to Sarah and asked with concern, "Miss, are you all right? It's dangerous here. Go take shelter with Varen." After that, she and Varen helped each other as they left. Then Fu Lu roared with absolute fury, "Gui ma dui." Murin was utterly terrified after hearing him say that. From the distance, it seemed a group of people was charging forward aggressively. In the blink of an eye, the Gui ma dui had arrived. He was still seething with rage as he shouted, "The bastards who act like animals and the bastards holding weapons, leave none of them alive. Kill them all for me." They immediately followed Fu Lu's command. A sharp arrow flew toward the blonde-haired man. Very quickly, he was unable to defend himself and collapsed. They also quickly realized that the approaching group was a punishment squad. A young man also began to grow fearful, his forehead covered in sweat. Then Fu Lu rushed forward, grabbed his head, and cursed, "You animal!" Then the Gui Ma Dui quickly eliminated everyone. Seeing how things were going, a subordinate anxiously asked his captain if the kingdom had sent knights. He couldn't believe it. There was no way the subjugation force could have made it this far. Just then, a soldier rushed up to report, "Captain, we're no match for them. I've never seen a knight order like this before." Murray started to worry. "I've never heard of a knight order like this in the kingdom. No, on the entire continent." Suddenly, an arrow flew in from nowhere. He was trying to plead, "Captain, please give the order." Before that soldier could even finish speaking, he was struck down by an arrow. Murray looked on in shock as the arrows appeared out of nowhere. He was cautiously scanning his surroundings. Amidst the chaos, Murray wondered, where did that come from? Even a crossbow couldn't pierce a man like that. Another subordinate pointed in one direction and reported much to his surprise. As Murray looked at the scene before him, his brow furrowed even deeper. He couldn't believe his eyes as he watched the group aggressively advancing. Murray was truly shocked. Mounted archers. And the arrows are flying all the way from over there. Not even a crossbow could do that. Damn it, if we want to live, we have to run. So he shouted his orders. Retreat through the back gate. Ignore the slaves. After that, Murray and his subordinates hastily fled the area. Fu Lu quickly noticed they were trying to escape. His eyes were locked on Murray. From behind, Fu Lu gave chase aggressively with an axe. "Where do you think you're going?" He heard a sound and immediately looked behind him. Then Murray ordered his subordinates, "It's just some short-legged guy, kill him." Hearing this, he roared in fury, "Stumpy legs! You dare call me stumpy legs? I hate that word more than anything." Then Fu Lu stomped his foot and yelled, "You're dead, you bastard!" Murray, while running away, directed, "Kill that dwarf." Immediately his subordinates rushed forward to block Fu Lu. He just coldly gripped the axe in his hand. Fu Lu quickly eliminated the men in his way while cursing loudly. His horse was still speeding forward. A man gritted his teeth as he saw Fu Lu approaching. Suddenly, he leaped powerfully from his saddle. A man cried out in terror when he realized Goff can fly. A second later, he ruthlessly eliminated that man. Murray glanced back somewhat terrified. At the same time, Fu Lu slowly raised his head. His eyes, blazing with killing intent, stared forward. Murray was scared out of his wits by Fu Lu's gaze. So he hastily commanded, "Stop that Goff guy at all costs." Murray's subordinates received the order and immediately rushed to attack. Meanwhile, he stood there calmly. Even weirder than the Legion's troops, these guys sure know how to run with their tails between their legs. Murray's men were still charging aggressively towards Fu Lu. Without a trace of fear, he smiled, "Wipe out the ones in front of us." Fu Lu's allies also quickly charged into battle. In the blink of an eye, his comrades had gained the upper hand. Just then, a man walked over and asked curiously, "What about the ones who ran away?" Fu Lu remained perfectly calm as he reminded him, "Don't worry." He suddenly gave a strange smile. "We still have Wu Lu, don't we?" In another area, Murray was desperately trying to escape. He was calculating to himself, "I have to report this to Baron Elvin." Suddenly, a series of chilling sounds echoed from behind Murray. He and his men were caught off guard and hit by the arrows. Then Murray's body fell heavily to the ground. He lay sprawled on the ground, gritting his teeth. Suppressing the pain, Murray slowly struggled to his feet. At the same time, Fu Lu raised his bow from behind. He then took out an arrow and prepared to aim. Fu Lu focused his aim, his cold expression reflecting off the sharp arrowhead. In the darkness, Murray stood frozen with fear. Meanwhile, Fu Lu was still concentrating on his shot. Murray suddenly looked behind him in panic. Murray was terrified. That's not an orc. It's a monster. Unable to wait any longer, Fu Lu immediately fired the arrow. He then turned away coldly, ordering his men to head back. Deep in the darkness, silence reigned. Murray had been taken down by one of Fu Lu's arrows. As time passed, a scene of grief enveloped the village. A woman was sobbing beside the body of her loved one. Seeing this, he couldn't help but feel his heart ache. Humans truly are the cruelest of beasts. The village chief and everyone knelt in fear, begging not to be taken away. Veron quickly spoke to reassure them. "Everyone calm down. These people are here to help us." They asked in disbelief, "Aren't they a subjugation army?" "That's right. There's no way that army would come here." Meanwhile, he ordered Xiong Shenlier prepare to translate for the Grand Emissary. He immediately followed Fu Lu's command. Suddenly, Wu Lu noticed something was wrong, so he spoke up to warn Fu Lu. "We can talk about this later." He grew curious. "Is something over there?" He then saw Wu Lu frown and reply, "I don't see anything." Deep in the forest, countless eyes were watching them. Fu Lu gasped in horror at the sight. He quickly saw the horde of green pigs charging at them. Deep in the forest, a horse galloped furiously forward. The middle-aged man on horseback was carrying out his mission. Right now, his expression was grim. The middle-aged man unconsciously recalled Fu Lu's instructions. "Report the situation here to the Grand Emissary." He didn't dare delay and spurred his horse onward. The figure of the middle-aged man gradually disappeared into the deep forest. The green pigs advanced, their faces filled with ferocity. Seeing this, Fu Lu yelled, "Liar!" Xiong Shen immediately knelt ready to receive his orders. He commanded, based on the situation, gather everyone who can still move and give them bows and arrows. He quickly followed Fu Lu's command. The creatures were still charging deeper into the forest. He stood motionless, watching the danger draw near. Behind him, everyone was taking up their bows and arrows. They, too, were ready to face the danger. At this moment, Wu Lu couldn't hide his surprise. "What is this, a wooden bow? What can you possibly shoot with this?" "Liar, when I give the signal, you signal your fair-skinned friends understand." Xiong Shen acknowledged his command. Furthermore, when Wu Lu asked how many enemies there were, his subordinate quickly reported the current situation. After listening, Fu Lu spoke up, "Same here, put them all in the quiver." Strange sounds echoed from deep within the forest. A moment later, the green orcs aggressively charged in with their weapons. Everyone raised their bows, ready for battle. The village chief was completely shocked. No way are they planning to kill the orcs from this distance with those tiny bows. Varan looked a little concerned. "I know they're amazing, but can they really defeat so many orcs?" Meanwhile, they charged forward with terrifying force. Fu Lu immediately raised his bow and commanded, "If you can't take down at least 2 with a single shot, we're all going to die." The next second, he fired his bow and loudly ordered his men to do the same. Following his command, everyone quickly fired their arrows. Just as expected, each of their arrows took down 2 green orcs. In the blink of an eye, a large number of them had been wiped out. He was horrified as he watched this scene. "I couldn't even see the arrows before the orcs fell. Those aren't bows, they're magical instruments." Fu Lu charged forward on his horse. "Gui Ma Dui, follow me." Meanwhile, the middle-aged man had arrived before the entrance to the barracks. He dismounted and rushed inside. The middle-aged man stood before a large tent and called out, "General." Hearing the commotion, Zhen Tian stepped outside. He quickly reported the situation. "A herd of hundreds of pigs. No, a horde of orcs is attacking the village gate." He and Yuan Hui were completely stunned by this news. At the village gate, the green orcs were growling fearsomely. The next second, it was eliminated by an arrow. Fu Lu easily dispatched the group of orc guards in front of him. He then ordered everyone to press the attack while advancing. In an instant, many of them collapsed. Seeing this, Fu Lu sneered, "Just as I thought, a pig is just a pig." Fu Lu swung his axe and yelled, "We are expert pig hunters." Seeing that things weren't going their way, the green orcs immediately turned to flee. When he saw this, he quickly pursued them. "This is a pig hunt. Drive them into the forest." They moved quickly, trying to evade the danger. But the green orcs could not escape the assault from Fu Lu's men. A green orc's head rolled and stopped in front of him. At that moment, Fu Lu noticed something. Someone was slowly emerging from deep within the forest. Mukabun dragged out the corpse of a green orc. He couldn't understand what was happening. "What's this now?" He roared in anger. "Any of you who dare to flee from humans, I'll chew you to a pulp." Seeing Mukabun appear, they excitedly roared, "Chieftain." He then powerfully raised the axe in his hand. Then Mukabun declared with vigor, "With me here the orcs shall be victorious. Warriors, show them the might of the orcs." He is Chieftain Mukabun, the first orc hero and strategist to introduce military formations to his kind. The green orcs seemed to have gained new strength. Long live Chieftain Mukabun. Mukabun continued to give orders, split into 4 groups, and attack the village. They obeyed his command, immediately turning back toward the village gate. The green orcs paid no mind to Fu Lu's presence nearby. He was very surprised. Is that a pig captain who actually knows how to use tactics? After that, Fu Lu ordered his subordinates to hurry back to the village. Danger once again descended upon the village. An aggressive green boar charged towards Veron, ready to attack. He immediately drew his spear to defend himself. Varan fell to the ground but managed to plunge his spear into its chest. He then forcefully thrust the spear deeper into the green boar's chest. All Varan wanted now was to kill it instantly. Meanwhile, the green boar wore a bizarre demonic grin. Then it swung its axe, slashing at his arm. Varan screamed in agony from the painful blow. Just then, an arrow flew from out of nowhere, aiming straight for the center of the green boar's forehead. He slowly sat up, clutching the wound on his arm. At the same time, Wu Lu rushed over. "You damn fool, get a grip." A moment later, he was stunned to see a herd of green boars appear. Wu Lu's brows furrowed immediately, and he couldn't help but curse. He then took the axe from his belt, and with all his might, Wu Lu threw it into the forehead of a green boar. The ones behind them continued their aggressive charge forward. Suddenly, many stones were thrown at the green boar's faces. He rushed in front of Varan and ordered, "Losing an arm won't kill you. Pick up your spear." He followed Wu Lu's words and picked up his spear. Their comrades also rushed forward quickly. He shouted orders, "Drive them all out. If they break through, we'll all die." Just then, Wu Lu heard a terrible scream from behind. He realized the women behind them were in danger. So Wu Lu immediately rushed over. He charged forward, cut down a green boar, and roared, "I thought we killed 100 of you who gave you mongrels permission to squeal." Then its body fell heavily to the ground. Meanwhile, Fu Lu turned and said, "Wu Lu, the situation is out of control." Wu Lu replied as he fought off a green boar, "I think we've killed 200, but another 400 have appeared." A moment later, he suddenly jumped off his horse. Wu Lu went to support him. "At this rate, I'm afraid it'll be hard to hold out until reinforcements arrive. If it were just us, we could just run, but behind them are innocent people facing danger." At that moment, Fu Lu suddenly broke into a sinister smile. He was still fighting with all his might. "There's no other way, we can only hold our ground." He agreed with Fu Lu, right, how can we call ourselves men of Gao Ju Li if we run from some pigs? Seeing the situation, Mu Jia Ben yelled, "Charge!" The horde of green boars stormed into the village like a hurricane. Wu Lu and he were incredibly excited, fighting together with one heart. Fu Lu and Wu Lu led the defense. The green boars were still charging, aggressively eager to attack. They stood on both sides of the battle line, ready to fight. Just then, an army appeared in the distance. Seeing this, Fu Lu and he were thrilled and ready for battle. Zhen Tian and his soldiers were riding in to provide support. As if filled with renewed strength, he let out a great roar. 3 green boars, sensing the situation was bad, called out the name of the great emissary. A moment later, they were cut down by a single sword strike. After killing the green boar, Fu Lu let out a delighted cry. Without a hint of fear, he charged forward to continue the hunt. They quickly rushed forward to eliminate the horde of green pigs. Zhen Tian and his soldiers were about to advance onto the battlefield. He immediately ordered his subordinates to charge in a wedge formation. A green pig quickly noticed the human cavalry approaching. Meanwhile, Mu Kabul watched everything from above. He spoke with great confidence. "I am the master strategist of the orcs. I have long prepared for the day we would face the cavalry of men. No matter how skilled they are, they cannot break our wall of brave warriors. Unite and live, resist and die." Mu Kabul commanded those below form up. The green pigs followed his command and huddled together. Fu Lu and Wu Lu could hear them shouting to one another to unite. The united green pigs formed an incredibly solid wall. Seeing this, he asked in confusion, "What is that horde doing?" He then turned to reply, "How should I know?" As Mu Kabul continued to command, "You will be mercilessly crushed before our orc wall." A soldier saw the situation and worriedly said, "Great emissary, if we crash into that, we'll all be thrown off." Zhen Tian frowned at them and remarked, "A strange bunch." With that, he spurred his horse hard. Zhen Tian and his comrades charged forward immediately, their morale incredibly high, their numbers vast. The green pigs were still forming their solid wall. In a flash, he was closing in on them. Very quickly, Zhen Tian was right in a green pig's face. He and his men dodged them, going around on both sides. Seeing this, the leader scoffed. "Look, the human cavalry is fleeing before our might." The green pigs roared in unison, "Long live the orcs." The archers were still drawing their bows. Wu Lu immediately shouted his command. "You couldn't miss this target even with your eyes closed, right?" He ordered everyone, "Fire your arrows." In an instant, countless green pigs were struck down. Under attack, their formation broke, and they fell in every direction. Mu Kabul wasn't surprised at all. They're acting just as I predicted." Then he yelled to the green pigs scatter. Just as expected, they immediately scattered. This caused the incoming arrows to miss their targets. Mukabel was extremely pleased as he witnessed this scene. Jen Tian silently assessed the situation. They gather into a mass to open a path for us, and now they scatter to make themselves easier to kill. Then he gave his order, full speed reverse course. Jen Tian then led the charge at full speed in the opposite direction. They charged forward to engage the green pigs in combat. Seeing this, the leader gave them another command: reform their firing arrows. Mukabel once again directed the green pigs to scatter in all directions. This allowed them to dodge the arrows, but the green pigs now faced danger from the charging cavalry. Based on the situation, he reminded them to unite once more. From above, Mukabel was still shouting for the green pigs to scatter, unaware of the ambush from behind. In an instant, his face turned deathly pale. Mukabun felt immense pain and let out a terrible scream. Then his body plunged off the cliff. Seeing this, Jen Tian felt a sense of relief, thinking that should be more than enough. The green pigs were completely stunned to find their chieftain was dead. He seized the opportunity and ordered the rest to be wiped out. Everyone immediately followed Jen Tian's command. In a flash, a significant number of them had fallen. Seeing the situation was bad, the green pigs urged each other to flee. The villagers saw this and shouted loudly with excitement. Afterward, everyone cheered with great joy. Peace once again enveloped the entire village. Only then did Jen Tian urge his horse forward. He and his soldiers then entered majestically. They moved together towards the villagers. Everyone was surprised to see Jen Tian approach. The distance between him and the villagers was very close. Just then, Jen Tian glanced to the side and saw a fallen soldier lying on the ground. Then Jen Tian shifted his gaze in another direction. At that moment, Sarah Euron and the village chief were staring at him blankly. Next, Jen Tian ordered for a translator to be brought over. Wu Lu immediately turned and commanded, "Where is the translator? Get over here." Xiong Shen obeyed and responded. He then said, "We will be leaving now." Xiong Shen immediately translated, "We will be leaving." Hearing this, Wu Lu stared blankly at Jen Tian. Just then, Yuan Hui turned to meet his gaze. He asked worriedly, "If you all leave like this, what are we to do?" Xiong Shen quickly relayed, "They are asking what they should do if we return now." He advised they should protect themselves. He translated it very accurately. Everyone was stunned after hearing what Jen Tian said. Then they immediately knelt and begged, "Please protect us, my lord." Xiong Shen reported accurately, "They are asking you to protect them, great envoy." Jen Tian remained very calm and asked, "Do you wish to become slaves?" He translated it without missing a word. "Do you all want to be slaves?" After hearing this, they became very frightened. Euron was stunned, thinking slaves. In the end, how are we any different from slaves? At that moment, he declared loudly, "We are those who live to protect our kingdom, our families, and our people. We do not wield our swords to protect those who entrust their lives to others like you." The village chief still wanted to ask for help, but Jen Tian cut him off. "This land is your own kingdom. Don't you understand that you must protect your own kingdom yourselves? You should not have invited those you could not handle. That money should have been spent on swords and armor. A kingdom that relies on the protection of others will surely fall. Do you want to become slaves, or do you want to take up your swords and risk your lives to protect your families? Those who dare to take up the sword will become my people and my family." After hearing this, Yuan Hui and Wu Lu stared at him. Wu Lu at his side gave a satisfied smile. The villagers were utterly astonished to hear what Jen Tian said. He continued to watch them with a thoughtful gaze. Then Jen Tian turned away and said, "I will be returning." Just then, Euron said decisively, "I will take up the sword myself." Hearing this, he paused. The blonde woman frantically called the boy's name. Euron spoke with righteous conviction. "Then if I die, you will protect my family, won't you?" Now Jen Tian glanced behind him. He saw the courageous boy gripping his sword tightly. Jen Tian couldn't help but remember a boy who once declared, "General, I will fight." Then he dismounted, his feet touching the ground. Euron stared blankly ahead, because Jen Tian had walked up to the boy, pointing out, "Your grip on the sword is too loose." He then reached out to correct Euron's posture, and Jen Tian taught him earnestly, "This is how you must hold a sword. Now, once you can hold a sword, don't think about death. You must live to protect your family." Hearing this, the boy couldn't help but tear up. As for him, he looked past Euron's shoulder. Zhen Tian then saw that everyone else was also picking up their swords. He just stared at the scene. Finally, Zhen Tian gave the order for everyone to retreat. Scene change, the sky was full of black crows flying frantically. They then perched on wooden beams as if observing something. One by one they flew down, swarming a body on the ground. Murray had now become a feast for the crows. They relentlessly tore at him, a truly gruesome sight. Hu Dalian was also there, staring at Murray. His eyes held a mix of unreadable thoughts. Scene change to another place where bodies lay thick on the ground. A soldier reported to Baron An Vin, "Sir, we have searched the area, but there are no peasants." At that moment, Hu Dalian rode up on his horse. He asked in a low voice, "Sir Hu Dalian, what do you make of this?" The man replied, "It seems the Odyssey and the mercenaries were wiped out by the same force." Baron An Vin wondered, did the peasants kill both the Odyssey and the mercenaries and then flee? Hu Dalian pondered for a moment. "I've never seen arrows like these. It seems an unknown power has intervened." His attitude was furious. "How dare they take my property?" Immediately, Baron An Vin turned away sharply. With a very stern expression, he quickly declared, "After we've gathered enough peasants to offer as tribute to the kingdom, I will eliminate those bastards." After speaking, Baron An Vin set off with his cronies and soldiers. Scene change, the sky today is clear and blue. A soldier shouts, "The Grand Envoy has arrived, open the gates." The imposing army immediately marched inside. All the people followed them in. One person gossiped, "Is the sunlight here that different? How can they be so pale?" Another remarked, "They look sick." They laughed and talked about the appearance of the people here. Fu Lu gritted his teeth and spoke up, "Are these brats slacking off?" He then threatened, "You get lazy with your training as soon as I'm gone, don't you? Today I will train you thoroughly." Hearing this, all the soldiers were terrified. Over here, Wu Dai walked over. Zhen Tian asked curiously, "What is the meaning of these victims following you?" He replied with a serious expression, "From now on, they are also people of Goguryeo." The man was a bit surprised. "Have you finally decided to continue the lineage of Lai Dai here?" Zhen Tian was annoyed. "What do you mean by that?" The man trembled. "You said you accepted them as your people." He answered decisively, "What we need right now are soldiers to fight off invaders. The women and children will become the emotional core for them to protect. That is the only reason I am taking them in as my own people." Wu Dai was a bit worried, his voice faltering. "So you mean?" Zhen Tian said no more and immediately turned to leave. Suddenly, someone called out, and he glanced back. Yuan Hui offered his opinion. "Since we've already accepted them as our people, please continue the line of Lai Di as the Jinwei Zhang has said." He smiled and continued, "We don't know where this is, or even if this is the same world we used to live in. Giving the soldiers and the people a purpose will give their lives meaning. You need to make a decision." Yuan Hui looked at Zhen Tian expectantly. After hearing those words, he seemed to hesitate a little. The other man just kept a warm smile that put others at ease. Zhen Tian suddenly turned away. "You be the Lai." "Dai, I can't do it." Wu Dai protested. "Da Shiji, how can you say such a thing?" He scoffed. "Then how about we let Fu Lu or Wu Lu do it?" He looked like he was going crazy. "No, you know full well this is no time for jokes." Zhen Tian was silent for a long time, as if deep in thought. Then he spoke slowly. "Jinwei Zhang, I've spent my whole life on the battlefield. I'm no good at matters of state. Handling the affairs here will be left to the Jinwei Zhang." Wu Dai didn't want the responsibility, but he didn't dare to refuse. Zhen Tian said firmly, "I will do what I can, so what I'm saying is, Great Wu Dai Jinwei Zhang, you should also take responsibility for what you can do. I'm not asking you to be the Lai Dai. Have you forgotten that what brings a nation to ruin is a weak Lai Di or emperor? I only know war and how to protect Goguryeo." Wu Dai's voice trembled as he looked at Zhen Tian with deep sympathy. Suddenly, there was a loud shout, and everyone turned to look in that direction. He scanned the area, and his brows furrowed. Soldiers were gathered in a large group over there. Something must have happened. Fu Lu said loudly, "Look, it seems we have relatives." Wu Lu replied coldly, "Nonsense, relatives." He continued to assess them. "Look, they're all so pale, they're clearly not locals." Hearing that, the gray-haired dwarf had a sad look on his face, as if he wanted to say something. His pupils dilated, his gaze lost in the distance. Returning to his memory, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the cliff. The three dwarf brothers were trying to escape from the orcs' encirclement. The gray-haired one blamed himself. This is all my fault just for a mineral vein. I came all the way to the Legangia Mountains, and now we're being hunted by orcs." The three brothers were terrified, and they turned back at the same time. Unexpectedly, an army appeared and dealt with the orcs. The dwarf brothers now shared a single thought: yellow skin, black hair, black eyes. They couldn't help but be surprised, confirming that the army was human. A few soldiers approached the dwarf brothers. They stared at the soldiers, thinking they look a little different from the humans we know. Conversely, the soldiers were startled by the appearance of the dwarves, just like Wu Lu and Fu Lu. Back in the present, in a small house nestled peacefully at the foot of a mountain, Elder Yang was deep in thought about something. Then he spoke slowly. From the looks of it, they seemed to be the blacksmiths of this world. "But what are they doing here?" The gray-haired dwarf exclaimed, "Look at this perfect balance, so pure. No impurities." Galing touched the armor surprised. How could humans create such perfect arms? Suddenly a loud noise from outside startled him. The three dwarf brothers peeked out the window to see what was happening. Galing seemed to have discovered something and looked bewildered. Wu Lu and Fu Lu were slowly approaching on horseback. The gray-haired dwarf now felt confused as well. He was speechless, seeing the two men of Wu Lu with their great height, bronze skin, and black hair. The legend was true, so that was the reason for all those weapons. Wu Lu and Fu Lu looked down at the dwarves and shouted in unison, "The Titan clan." The dwarf brothers turned to look at each other with a mysterious smile. They suddenly hugged each other and danced in a circle, looking very happy. Seeing this, Fu Lu was at a loss for words. Gentian let out a sigh, looking annoyed. Night had now fallen on a military camp. Gentian stood alone, something weighing on his mind. He kept thinking about Yuan Hui's words, Gentian's eyes revealing his unresolved worries. He also remembered Bao Zhang Wang, who had told Gentian to follow his heart. He thought endlessly, "I am a descendant of Lai Di, but I have lived half my life on the battlefield because I am an illegitimate child." A cold wind blew through Gentian's hair, revealing the handsome features of his face. Gentian was tormented. "The Gao Gu Li I wanted to protect has been burned to the ground, and I couldn't turn back, coming all this way to protect Lai Di's main bloodline." But the child turned out to be just a little girl. Not only that, she wasn't even of Lai Di's bloodline, just a child born in the palace. "I must make a choice for the soldiers who believe in me. If this is where I came from, I will build up my strength and attack the Tang army. Otherwise, continuing the history of Gao Gu Li will be my responsibility and the purpose of those who follow me." Zhen Tian's eyes suddenly widened, the bright moonlight clearly reflected in them. Zhen Tian smiled confidently. "So it's been decided then." He stopped thinking and quickly went inside the camp. The next morning, the sky was unusually clear and blue. Everyone was busy with their own tasks. Zhen Tian was taking a leisurely stroll with his attendant. Yuan Hui turned to him happily. At first the farmers were very wary of the soldiers, but now they've become so close they're falling in love. After speaking, Zhen Tian noticed a young man and woman talking to each other on the other side. He looked incredulous. In just 1 month. Yuan Hui added to his report, "The food problem has been solved thanks to the seeds the farmers brought. What a relief." And those people called the GOP turned out to be not only blacksmiths, but also skilled architects, so the housing issue was also easily resolved. And because they were amazed by our metallurgy techniques, they are now studying under Yang Lao to learn many things. As soon as they saw Zhen Tian's group, the dwarf brothers respectfully bowed their heads in greeting. Seeing this, Wu Lu and Fu Lu grinned with delight. Yuan Hui hesitated, "But the problem is we lack meat and wine as well as clothes for the upcoming wedding ceremonies, and we're also short on bows and arrows." Zhen Tian immediately asked, "So what's the solution?" He slowly replied, "According to Veron, if we secretly go to the city to sell the hides and bones of the monsters we've hunted, we can earn some money. With that money, we can buy the things we can't find here, solving the problems of food, clothing, and even weapons." Hearing this, Wu Dei immediately volunteered, "I will go as the envoy." Yuan Hui quickly stopped him. "The head guard has many things to do here, so I will go both to handle our problem and to observe the political situation." Zhen Tian looked at the two of them without saying a word. Outside the city walls, the goods were prepared and ready. Everyone had also changed into very discreet clothing. Yuan Hui asked Zhen Tian curiously, "Usually you would ask me to observe the political situation, so why are you so insistent on coming along?" He was still rambling on when Jen Tian cut him off. "Let's go." The caravan quickly began to move forward. Wooden crates were stacked neatly on the carts. Suddenly, a mysterious figure was hiding behind a tree, acting very suspiciously. Riso carefully watched every single move of the Jen Tian group. Jen Tian's group finally arrived their carriages, entering the gate one by one. The gate was strictly guarded by soldiers on both sides. When Irun saw Veron, he immediately let him pass. Suddenly, his expression soured, his eyebrows knitting together. At that moment, Veron turned his head back to thank Irun profusely. He stepped closer to him, rummaging through his pouch. He then presented a money pouch to Irun, who quickly signaled for Veron to go through the gate. Irun also spoke up, "Get inside quickly." Overjoyed, Veron bowed his head hastily as Irun stared intently at Jen Tian, who was riding in on horseback. He felt a growing irritation staring at him without blinking. Just as Jen Tian's tall figure was passing by, he sharply ordered him to stop. Irun quickly ran over to Jen Tian, trying to get a clear look at his face, his eyes widening menacingly. Irun used his blade to lift the fabric covering Jen Tian's face, pulling it away until his whole head was revealed. Irun paused for a moment when he saw Jen Tian's appearance. His ice-cold expression struck fear into the man. He couldn't help but be surprised. Black hair and tan skin. Veron immediately stepped in to defuse the situation, offering another bag of money. His posture was completely submissive, bowing low before Irun. Veron was afraid, but he could only manage a forced smile to smooth things over. He pulled the blade away from Jen Tian's head. Irun reluctantly decided not to press the matter, allowing them to enter. Inside was a spacious courtyard that welcomed Jen Tian's group. The sky was sunny today, casting a golden light upon the red-tiled roofs. Jen Tian suddenly wondered Veron what was that man's name just now. He quickly replied, "His name Irun Kaksurman." Hearing that name, Jen Tian suddenly felt a surge of anger. He radiated killing intent, believing he now remembered the man. Yuan Hui smiled gently, following behind him. He stopped sensing something strange. Then Yuan Hui turned to scan the area behind them. It was just a bustling crowd of people passing by and shopping. Seeing nothing suspicious, Yuan Hui quietly continued on. In truth, a dark shadow was watching them from behind. Riso thought to himself, "That must be goblin hide. Then there must be goblin blood there too." Elsewhere, Jen Tian's group arrived at a quiet shop. One person asked in surprise, "Veron, how did you manage to kill a goblin? Even 20 soldiers have a hard time taking one down." He replied politely, "I'll tell you later, uncle. Please calculate the total for all this first. By the way, uncle, do you need any goblin blood?" He said in a low voice. Only sorcerers buy that stuff. What sorcerer would be in a remote place like this? Riso had been watching their entire conversation from a distance. The old man suddenly burst through the door. "I'll buy it." The shop owner was bewildered, thinking Riso was a sorcerer. The old man was engrossed with the goblin blood, paying no attention to his surroundings. Riso rejoiced inwardly. "With this, I can finally escape this cursed level 2. The owner was quite baffled. "A sorcerer, what do you think?" The old man immediately made an offer. "Excellent. I'll buy 3 vials for 1 gold coin and 50 silver coins." He protested vehemently. "What it should be, 1 gold coin and 50 silver coins per bottle, right?" "I'm sorry, sir, but that price is a bit difficult." Riso didn't give up rummaging through his coat pocket. "Wait." Then the old man took out 1 gold coin and 90 silver coins. Veron and the shopkeeper were speechless. The smiles on their faces were forced. Riso looked pitiful. "This is all the money I have. Is it still not enough? I'm begging you." The owner shouted loudly, "You swindler! You look no different from a beggar. Don't try to trick me into getting a free meal." The old man immediately yelled back his attitude, extremely angry. "How dare you? I am Riso, the genius wizard who appears only once every 100 years. Hearing this, he said contemptuously, "Even a third circle wizard is gifted gold and silver by the nobility. You think I'd believe you're destitute? If you're called a genius, how could you be stuck at the second circle?" That question left Riso speechless, and his face turned pale. Riso seemed to lose his footing and began to collapse. He just remained silent, like that the atmosphere was now very somber. Riso suddenly chanted a spell, "O light born from the desire of fire." A few seconds later, a stream of light appeared, and at the same time he picked up the bottle of goblin blood. The shopkeeper's eyes widened at Riso's magic. The old man spoke slowly. "It's true that I haven't achieved enlightenment, and am still at the second circle. But the crime of insulting a wizard. Before he could finish his sentence, a piece of wood was thrown at Riso's face. The surprise attack made the old man stagger and fall to the ground. Both of them were horrified to see Riso lying unconscious. It was Zhen Tian who had acted, his tone annoyed. "Can beggars be sorcerers here too?" Yuan Hui said softly. "Not really. It's more likely that a sorcerer became a beggar." The red mark on Riso's face looked very pitiful. Yuan Hui narrowed his eyes. The magic system in this place is quite hard to understand. A long time had passed, but the old man still hadn't woken up. In his dream, Riso remembered the old days. "I am a genius wizard who appears only once every 100 years. It takes others 2 years to master mana, but it only took me half a year, so becoming a great wizard was just a matter of time. But then I got stuck at the second circle. Master abandoned me. Despite my desperate pleas, I became an outcast everywhere. With the belief that there must be a way forward, I spent my whole life studying, accumulating knowledge comparable to that of great wizards. But I could never conquer the second circle." Back in reality, Zhen Tian's carriage moved quickly through the dark night. Riso kept talking in his sleep. "Master, please don't abandon me. I just need goblin blood to reach the second circle." Yuan Hui turned to Zhen Tian and asked, "Do we have to go back early because of that old man?" He replied sternly, "They say the mages and wizards of this land are rare and profound." He understood, smiling, "So you kidnapped him, afraid someone else would steal him away." He immediately denied it. "Nonsense, I just conveniently picked him up. Finders keepers is that wrong?" Yuan Hui continued to wonder, "But what do you plan to do with him? He's both rare and precious." Riso's eyes suddenly welled up with tears, his eyebrows furrowing at the same time. He suddenly woke up looking as if he was trying to remember something. Riso couldn't help but be alarmed while Zhen Tian was calm. "You're awake." He saw the old man's tears and asked, "But why are you crying?" Yuan Hui chuckled. "Isn't crying natural after being kidnapped?" Zhen Tian justified, "I was just saying." He teased, "That's what kidnappers always say too. You have a double standard. When I do it, it's for a just cause. But when others do it, it's a crime, you know." Behind them, Riso thought in confusion, "Who are these people? What are they going to do to me?" But surely they don't know that an ordinary rope can't bind a wizard. The old man's eyes lit up as if he was concentrating on something. Behind Riso, the ropes were slowly loosening with his incantations. Yuan Hui and Zhen Tian happened to witness that moment. Riso wasted no time and immediately launched a counterattack. A bolt of lightning struck directly at Zhen Tian's head, but he was a step ahead of the old man, calmly dealing with the power. Riso was a little concerned. Over here, Yuan Hui also took action, his voice filled with killing intent as he blocked the old man's lightning bolts. It didn't affect him at all, and the exchange was over. The air grew tense. Zhen Tian thought back and sighed in relief, while Yuan Hui seemed amused. Riso thought fearfully, "How did he block my spell?" Riso immediately shouted some kind of incantation, and the ring on his hand suddenly began to glow. Riso didn't hesitate to ask, "Who are you people?" Zhen Tian was surprised. "Well, now you can speak our language." The old man ignored him. "How can you block lightning energy without a shield?" A murderous look appeared in his eyes. "How do you know our language?" Only then did Riso explain coldly, "It's the power of an item, don't meddle in my affairs." Zhen Tian wondered, "The power of an item, what does that mean?" "I was worried because we left that liar back in the city, but thankfully we can still communicate." The old man persisted, "How did you neutralize the lightning energy? What kind of magic formula did you use?" Yuan Hui looked Riso up and down. "It seems you are also a mage, aren't you? In that case, do you know how rude it is to just ask about other people's secrets?" Hearing this, the old man's voice faltered, and he spoke up again. "Wait a minute." Yuan Hui's eyebrows furrowed as if he was deep in thought. In front of them now was a group of people approaching. He suddenly gave a dangerous smile. "We have to deal with these uninvited guests first." Irun led the group of men, and they were all holding weapons. He stared at Zhen Tian's group, his face full of cunning. Irun recalled what had happened earlier, thinking how foolish it was to give up a steady income for a moment of greed. Back then, his eyes were always following Veron's group, which made Irun suspicious. But there were a lot of goods loaded onto the carriage. Besides, I could tell they looked quite expensive. These two just happened to be alone. All we need to do is take care of them, and we can keep our income and get that pile of goods too. Irun was now smiling like a victor. "You unlucky people, you." Before he could finish his sentence, Yuan Hui had already made his move. Burned to a crisp, all of them were incinerated on the spot. He even took out a talisman on which were a few mysterious characters. It seemed Yuan Hui was targeting Irun, causing him to become terrified. Zhen Tian flashed a satisfied smile. "We meet again, Kan Su man." He immediately ordered his comrades to eliminate the two of them. A few men who weren't burned immediately charged forward. Yuan Hui grasped the situation and threw out a few more talismans. The power of the talismans made them collapse. At this moment, only Irun was left standing there with his mouth agape. Zhen Tian suddenly began to walk slowly towards Irun. His hands had been clenched into fists for some time now. Zhen Tian's face darkened as he thought about something. A man in black suddenly attacked him. Zhen Tian immediately drew the sword at his side without hesitation. His blade pierced through the man's body, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. Irun yelled like a madman, "Stop those bastards!" He was bewildered when he saw the soldiers still just standing there. No one dared to step forward despite Irun's urging. Yuan Hui continued to chant the incantation. His aura was incredibly eerie. Instantly, the remaining soldiers' internal organs were set on fire. The pain was so intense that they screamed horribly. Yuan Hui paid them no mind. His gaze was incredibly cold. Chan Tian walked majestically toward Irun. He was so scared he was crawling on the ground. His silence made his opponent nervous. Chan Tian showed a look of anger mixed with disgust, and Irun was so scared he wet his pants. He slowly raised his sword. Time seemed to stand still, waiting for Chan Tian to strike. Irun screamed his lungs out when he realized his fate. His movement was decisive, swinging the blade towards him. Suddenly, just as the sword touched Irun's head, Chan Tian stopped. Yuan Hui sighed from behind Grand Messenger. "You really are something." His expression was calm, carefully observing his opponent's face in the quiet night. No one knew that a commotion had occurred in the forest. Yuan Hui came closer and advised, "Let's end this feud here and go." Hearing those words, sweat soaked Irun's face. Chan Tian remained silent, his eyes dark and gloomy. Then he went along with Yuan Hui's suggestion, taking out a talisman. Irun's face turned pale, as if all the blood had been drained from it. Chan Tian looked at the talisman and solemnly performed the technique. Immediately, excruciating pain coursed through his body. Irun resisted at first, but eventually collapsed to the ground. Chan Tian said in a low voice, "It seems I still can't do it." Yuan Hui comforted him. "If anyone could do it, it wouldn't be called magic, would it?" He sat down next to Irun's body. As if discovering something, Yuan Hui turned back in shock and said, "His heart has stopped." Riso witnessed everything, thinking he cast the spell with just a single activation word, without any incantation. He couldn't help but be shocked, feeling quite worried. Riso then realized, come to think of it, we're heading towards the Lugansk mountains where dragons live. That must mean that person is definitely a dragon. Riso looked at Yuan Hui and speculated. He immediately calculated that if he could become a follower of a dragon, the source of magic, he would pass the second round. Yuan Hui suddenly became embarrassed. "First of all, let me apologize for the kidnapping." He began to say, "If you don't like it." Riso, hearing this, became flustered. "No, sir. You must have brought me here because you need me. Please give me your command. I will do anything." The scene changes to a fresh morning. The lake's surface is calm. Riso's jaw dropped, unable to believe his eyes. As he followed Chan Tian, he thought, "I never expected to find a village this well organized in the Lugansk mountains." The discipline and morale of the soldiers were on par with the Empire's. Wu Lao and Fu Lao were already waiting outside for Chan Tian and were curious about Riso. He suddenly shouted when he saw them giants. Fu Lao turned to Wu Lao and asked, "Why does everyone call us giants?" Riso couldn't help but exclaim, "Even dwarves, who were thought to have disappeared after the Demon God War 1,000 years ago, are here." Chan Tian turned back as if to say something to him. "Shaman, no sorcerer. You haven't forgotten your crime of trying to harm Valor, one of my people, have you?" Riso said in a weak voice, "It is because he insulted me." Zhen Tian didn't beat around the bush, directly ordering Wu Lu and Fu Lu to take him to the execution ground. The two of them dragged the old man away as Riso struggled. Fu Lu asked in annoyance, "Where did you pick this old man up?" He answered casually, "I just happened to find him on the road." At the execution ground, the atmosphere was now extremely tense. Sitting on the throne, Zhen Tian spoke. "I said I picked this old man up, but it wouldn't be wrong to call it kidnapping either. But I cannot forgive you for trying to harm Veron, my guide, and my person. Riso looked pitiful. It was because they insulted me, a mage. After hearing this, he sighed and replied briefly, I understand. The old man now felt anxious and fearful. Jen Tian said in a low growl, however, you also insulted me, old man, when you tried to harm my subordinate. Riso said, trembling, no, how can you say such a thing? He couldn't hold back his anger and shouted, because the strong will live. Jen Tian emphasized one thing, good triumphs over evil. He continued to assert, don't you understand that it's not good punishing evil, but that the winner takes all? In the end, the strong will take everything. Hearing these words, Riso showed a contemptuous expression. Jen Tian said sarcastically, a weakling who carelessly insults others is only hastening his own death. Kidnapping, is that really the right word? Don't you realize it wouldn't be strange at all if I beat you to death right now? Besides, you lack the skills to be respected as a mage, you know. Am I wrong? The old man clenched his hands into fists but could do nothing. Riso lowered his head and blamed himself. I'm so pathetic. My entire 75 years of life have been pitiful and miserable. Jen Tian's voice suddenly softened. I will give you a chance. Will you continue to live like this, wandering like a beggar and being humiliated? Or will you follow me? He gave the old man a choice. Riso couldn't believe his ears and asked again. Jen Tian slowly walked down the steps. More than just an outstanding mage, I need a sage who possesses deep knowledge of this world. He approached the old man, his steps full of majesty. Jen Tian said solemnly, so will you join me? Riso was silent for a long time, giving no answer. He stared at the old man. I will ask one last time. I need you. Will you join my great cause? Riso asked unconsciously, then what will you do for me? Jen Tian affirmed, I will not stand by when someone mistreats my family and my people. If anyone dares to look down on your talents, I will surely crush them to pieces. Hearing these words, tears welled up in the old man's eyes. Immediately, Riso bowed deeply before him. The old man's attitude was sincere. I will serve you as my master. Night fell. At the camp, bright stars shone down on the forest. Riso stared blankly at Wu Lu and Fu Lu, who were discussing something. The old man thought to himself, I thought he would treat me like a common servant. Riso didn't forget the moment that afternoon when he heard Jen Tian instruct Wu Lu and Fu Lu, you two take care of him. From now on, he will be the one to teach you. They vehemently protested his command. Jen Tian said coldly, are we just going to cower here forever? We must understand this place to decide the path ahead. First, instead of relying on the power of that item, you must learn our language. When you have finished, I will return the item to you. Riso was a little bewildered, but he didn't dare to resist. He glanced at the old man. Do I look like someone who covets such things? Back in the present, the old man sighed and thought to himself he must have had his reasons that day. Riso eyed the two of them for a long time. Even if they are from a legendary clan, a dwarf is still a dwarf. Suddenly, someone came to their room, much to the old man's surprise. Seeing Jen Tian, Riso immediately greeted him respectfully. He looked at the old man in silence, not saying a word. Then Jen Tian took off the ring on his hand. He then handed it to Riso, which confused the old man. When he was done, Jen Tian turned away as if he didn't want to see Riso's expression. He hesitated for a moment, then said, it's broken. The old man then slowly put the ring on his hand. Riso quickly cast a translation spell to understand what Jen Tian was saying. When the old man understood, he cried out, Master, this isn't broken. But he had already left through the door. The night was quiet, and the sound of insects could be heard. At this time, Xiong Shen and Veron were transporting goods by carriage. Suddenly, something up ahead startled him. Annoyed, Xiong Shen gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath. He turned to Veron and asked him to stop. Xiong Shen suddenly dropped to the ground as if listening for something. Veron, not understanding what was happening, immediately questioned him. Xiong Shen broke out in a sweat, still not saying a word. Then he said, leave the carriage behind. This left him bewildered. Xiong Shen went to the back of the carriage and removed the tarp covering the goods. He moved swiftly while Veron could only stand there dumbfounded. Xiong Shen securely fastened the bundle to his body. He urged, hurry up unless you want a meaningless death. Veron's face went pale and he didn't know what to do. In the end, the two of them left the area. They hid themselves in a bush to observe the situation. A moment later, two soldiers approached the carriage. Bino shouted in anger, damn it. I can't believe they abandoned the carriage. They can't be far. Spread out and find them. With that, they moved closer to where Veron and his companion were hiding. He panicked internally. Why are they coming in this direction? Xiong Shen suddenly stood up without warning Veron. He squeezed his eyes shut, not wanting to die such a pointless death. Noticing something was odd, Veron dared to crack open his eyes to look. Seeing the soldiers sprawled on the ground, he was stunned and wondered, what just happened? It's impossible he dealt with those two all by himself. Xiong Shen threatened the remaining soldier. You'd be wise to stay silent, he said coldly. If you answer my questions honestly, you can go home to your family. The man answered truthfully, I'm single. Xiong Shen was unrelenting, pressing his sword against the man's neck. He growled, why did you attack us? The man said in fear, an order came from the kingdom to recruit soldiers, so Baron Anvin is forcing farmers into service to meet his quota. Xiong Shen's face darkened as he thought, so that's why those mercenaries were chasing the farmers. I have to report this to the barracks immediately. He begged, please spare me, I have a girlfriend. He asked angrily, you said you were single. The soldier said fearfully, well, I do have a girlfriend. Xiong Shen wondered, should I kill him? The cold blade was now pressed against his neck. He finally relented. All right, you answered as I asked, so I will let you go as promised. Xiong Shen said sternly, but I'll feel a bit uneasy if you go back the way we came so close. Your eyes walk in that direction and count to 1,000 before turning back. The soldier obediently followed his instructions. Veron said with some concern, is this all right? If we let him go, a pursuit squad might come after us. He smiled. You don't have to worry about that. This guy is very honest. He won't sell us out. He grinned widely. Of course, you don't need to worry. Without hesitation, Xiong Shen ordered, all right, run at full speed. The soldier ran while counting as he was told. Veron felt relieved and stopped watching him. Suddenly, a sound made him turn back to look. Xiong Shen had a dangerous look on his face. You have to be more careful. That soldier had slipped and fallen down a deep cliff. Veron followed him, cursing inwardly. You liar! A few other soldiers appeared. What's going on here? They were shocked to find that Piano was dead. That man immediately grew wary of Xiong Shen's group. He smiled dangerously, showing no fear at all. Xiong Shen mocked, why does heaven insist on testing a good person like me? The soldier on the other side asked, there are only 2 of you. Then he ordered, finish them quickly, and let's head back. Veron asked fearfully from behind, what are you going to do? Xiong Shen's demeanor was completely calm in the face of such an aggressive force. In another scene, Sarah was rushing off somewhere. She burst into the room calling out Fu Lu's name. He asked in confusion, it's so late, what are you doing here? Sarah was full of worry. When is Veron coming back? Fu Lu smiled and answered, probably tomorrow. He suddenly noticed something and paused. Sarah's eyes clearly showed her anxiety. Fu Lu asked directly, is something bothering you? She answered honestly, well, the road here is very dangerous, and who knows what tricks the punishment squad will pull this time. He looked at Sarah seriously. Are you worried because that liar is with him? She didn't hide it, to be honest, a little. Fu Lu suddenly burst into loud laughter. He couldn't stop. Sarah stared at him blankly, not understanding what was happening. Back on the other side, Xiong Shen let out a weary sigh. He drew the sword from his back and said, nothing ever goes smoothly. It seemed Veron wanted to stop Xiong Shen. Then they charged forward one after another, ready for battle. His movements were agile, not allowing his opponents to find a weakness. Xiong Shen observed the situation seriously, his eyes narrowing. He suddenly unleashed a move, catching his opponent completely off guard. Veron watched in alarm, worried for Xiong Shen. The 2 sides fought fiercely, the clash of swords ringing out. He skillfully weaved his way through the soldiers. In the blink of an eye, he took down 4 of them at once. Fresh blood splattered everywhere amidst terrible screams. Hung Sam's expression was terrifying, radiating pure killing intent. Veron watched the whole thing with his mouth wide open. He acted like nothing happened, urging him to hurry up. Veron's face beamed with excitement as he looked at Hung Sam with pride. After the battle ended, there was suddenly a loud noise. It was accompanied by a strong gust of wind, creating a ghastly howling sound. Veron looked up at the sky helplessly and cried out, this can't be happening. The 2 of them looked in the direction of the sound, completely bewildered. Immediately, a massive foot appeared. Approaching them was a 2-headed ogre. It looked at the 2 with great hunger, roaring continuously as if it wanted to devour them. Veron and Hung Sam backed away, unsure of how to confront it. His face was as pale as a sheet, as if all the blood had been drained from it. Veron tried to calm himself down, focusing on finding a way out. He observed it and thought it might be the king of the land monsters. But what about Hung Sam, the man who had cut down soldiers with a single strike? Varan suddenly turned around to find he had vanished. Now he was all alone left to face the ogre. The scene shifts to the military camp where it was completely quiet. Jen Tian said sternly, "Today's meeting ends here." Suddenly, a soldier rushed in from outside with an urgent report. Wu Dai and Jen Tian looked at each other, understanding the situation immediately. The soldier stood respectfully outside the door, ready to report. He quickly said, "We saw smoke rising from the northern border tower." He was quite surprised to hear the word smoke and immediately asked again. The soldier nodded. "It seems something has happened to the farming village we trade with." Without hesitation, Jen Tian asked about the distance to get there. He immediately replied, "Less than half a day's ride on horseback." He thought for a moment. This couldn't be ignored. "Then we'll see if they are friend or foe. Maintain a minimum defensive force. The rest of you march out." Everyone there obeyed the order and prepared to deploy. The camp was in a flurry that night, hastily arranging horses and gathering bows and arrows. Riso was also baffled. A sudden march. The old man asked loudly, "What's going on?" Riso froze in place when he saw something. The old man seemed unsteady on his feet. The order to march was just given. How could they? At that moment, Jen Tian rode up on horseback behind Riso, startling him. The army had everything prepared. Just as he had said, thousands of soldiers stood in perfect formation, a spectacular sight. Riso broke into a sweat, thinking, "I've traveled to every corner of the continent, but I've never seen an army this disciplined. A unit with this much presence is on par with the royal knights." Jen Tian shouted, asking if the soldiers were ready. Fu Lu grinned confidently. "We just await your command." He didn't forget to remind Fu Lu keep an eye on Riso. He immediately asked, "Master, are you going too?" Jen Tian said in a low voice, "Riso, they say you have seen the world, but have you ever seen a battlefield?" The old man respectfully replied that he had seen one before. He glanced at Riso and reminded him, "Observe our battle today and report on how this front and our way of fighting are different." The old man thought to himself, such simple words, yet they carry an irresistible power. The thick smell of blood was overwhelming, but he remained calm, his deep voice enunciating every word clearly. Riso knelt before Jen Tian, neither too quickly nor too slowly. The old man was devoted to following the orders he gave. The strong wind tonight blew against the hem of Jen Tian's robe. He adjusted his posture to be more solemn. Jen Tian immediately called for the entire army to set out. Fu Lu followed right after to provide support. The gates of the barracks were opened. The urgent sound of marching footsteps. Jen Tian led the way, looking incredibly majestic, followed by an army of soldiers with flags fluttering. Over here, the bound commoners were begging ceaselessly. Hecker said slowly, "We have gathered the useless ones. Everyone except the men who can fight, and the young women." Baron An Yuen gave a cold command, "Get rid of all of them." Upon hearing this, he ordered the army to shoot the civilians. Flaming arrows were raised high, waiting for the chance to fire. Instantly, the sky turned a catastrophic crimson. The arrows fell to the ground, burning the innocent people to death. Just a few seconds later, a huge fire erupted violently. Baron An Yuen said indifferently, "This village is too small." A subordinate beside him added, "The prisoners said there's a larger settlement nearby. Sounds like it's quite big." He seemed a bit suspicious and immediately asked again. The men behind them now had dark expressions. Baron An Yuen flashed a dangerous smile. They began to move forward, leaving the pitiful little village behind. Finally, Jen Tian's army arrived. They stopped in an empty field when they realized they had arrived too late. The armies of Baron An Yuen and him clashed. Scene changed. The sky today is full of stars. The scenery is incredibly quiet. The ogre took heavy steps forward. It looked around, searching for something. After fumbling around for a bit, the ogre suddenly became angry. The two of them carefully hid in the bushes, observing the situation. He complained, "What the hell did I do to deserve this?" Veron said, panting, "But at least we shook off the two-headed ogre, so we're lucky." Suddenly, a strange noise made him turn his head. A giant green creature was staring at them. Veron was bewildered now. "Oh no, it looks like we've entered monster territory." Xiong Shen was scared, really. As he was speaking, a rock suddenly hit him straight in the head. Xiong Shen fell to the ground. In contrast, that green monster had a defiant look on its face. He charged forward angrily. "These little brats are getting on my nerves." Veron immediately tried to stop him, but it was probably too late. Xiong Shen had already kicked it into the sky. He lost his composure at that terrifying sight. Veron was speechless, sweating profusely as he stammered, "Baby goblins are only raised in goblin villages. So I was going to say we should just ignore them and leave, but—" A few seconds later, it was as if countless eyes were watching them from a distance. Many green monsters surrounded them. Veron said miserably, "It seems it's too late." Xiang Shen now regretted his actions. Elsewhere, Zhen Tian's army had arrived at the village. Charred corpses lay scattered on the ground. He saw the scene and remained silent, saying nothing. Zhen Tian turned to Wu Di and instructed, "We'll rest here for a bit, then set up an ambush." Riso walked over to him and said, "Based on the crest on this arrowhead, they appear to be Baron An Vin's private soldiers." Zhen Tian observed the arrow, understanding what the old man said. His voice lowered slightly. "I heard he came to this area he rarely visits and started capturing farmers. Do you know why?" Riso's eyes were filled with sadness. "The reason he rarely comes here is because the monsters in this place are very fierce and numerous, so sending troops would lead to heavy losses. And since the city at the entrance to the Lugansk Mountains is a commercial hub, they don't need many slaves." The old man suddenly added, "But in this case, I believe it's to gather manpower for the war. The more the city's trade develops, the more the wealthy try to help their children evade military service, so it's common to buy serfs or slaves and send them to the battlefield as substitutes along with bribes. It's very likely they're planning to use the captured farmers as slave substitutes." After hearing this, Zhen Tian sneered, "Insane, do they really think they can win like that?" Riso looked quite worried. The Haiyan Kingdom probably doesn't care whether they win or lose. He turned to look at the old man in astonishment, his expression full of disbelief. Riso quickly explained, "This country is situated between giant empires, sharing a border with two great empires and facing a maritime empire across the sea. So they are always under their control and subject to the demands of the stronger party, which is why they have survived in wars by providing troops to both sides. As a result, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. That is the reality of this country, the Haiyan Kingdom, a land that truly has no one to protect it." Zhen Tian gazed into the distance. "They've given up on being a nation." A soldier suddenly reported, "General, we've found the enemy encampment. There are about 20 cavalry and 600 infantry, and we also saw about 250 people who seem to have been kidnapped from here, locked in wagons. It seems they're resting before moving on to another village." Upon hearing the news, Zhen Tian prepared himself for battle. He declared grimly, "Tonight will be a very long night." The scene shifts to Baron An Vin's camp where some villagers are being beaten. The soldiers were torturing them for trying to escape. They were gloating, wanting to take turns punishing the villagers. A few others were harassing the women. Their pleas for mercy could be easily heard. The women tried to struggle violently. A few guards at the gate were annoyed about something. The blonde one said irritably, "We have to stand guard instead of having fun with those women." The one next to him whined, "I've been feeling restless for a while now." They looked ahead, one after another, their faces filled with worry. The thunder of horse hooves was rapidly approaching the camp. The blonde one suddenly got a creepy feeling. The man next to him sneered, "Don't tell me you're afraid of wolves." Immediately, an arrow shot straight through his head. That man and a few others fell to the ground. To the blonde man's astonishment, the men beside him were now also lying unconscious on the ground. The blonde man raised his blade, his face covered in sweat. He was the last target, an arrow striking him right between the eyes. Not a single gate guard was left alive. Zhen Tian's imposing figure stood over their bodies. He and his troops had quickly closed in on the enemy. Zhen Tian ordered without hesitation, "Send the signal." Pigeons were prepared for the task. The soldiers decisively released them into the sky, and the birds flew off swiftly on their mission. Zhen Tian stopped in front of a bush, as if lost in thought. He narrowed his eyes. They've secured the escape route. Zhen Tian immediately gave a signal, as if giving instructions. Drawing his sword, he said, "From this moment on, observe carefully." Zhen Tian and his troops assumed a battle stance. He made it clear that this was their fight. The soldiers raised their bows high, determined not to miss a single target. Fu Lu grinned with delight, gripping the bow tightly in his hand. Then Fu Lu shouted for everyone to fire their arrows. The soldiers in the camp were completely unaware, busy drinking and feasting. The yellow-bearded man suddenly noticed something and looked bewildered, trying to listen for the strange noises. He wondered what was happening. A dark mass appeared in the sky. The yellow-bearded man immediately determined it wasn't birds, and then countless arrows began closing in on them. By the time he realized it, it was too late. Arrows pierced through the soldiers and blood splattered everywhere. From above, bodies were scattered all over the ground. It was only then that the other soldiers began to panic and defend themselves. Baron An Rong angrily shouted, "What is happening?" Soldiers ran around in chaos, accidentally bumping into him hard. Hu Dalian appeared to reassure him. "Please don't worry, my lord, go inside where it's safe." Baron An Rong's attitude was extremely unpleasant. He angrily snapped at Hu Dalian, "Deal with this quickly." The man immediately gave an order. Archers prepared to fire back at the enemy spearmen from the rear, prepare an ambush at the entrance. Hu Dalian grumbled in frustration. "Who are these bastards?" The soldiers had quickly gathered at the gate, observing ceaselessly. They faced forward, preparing to charge. Hu Dalian narrowed his eyes, sensing something strange. A huge army was slowly advancing towards him. Hu Dalian felt a bit panicked. Cavalry, so they aren't just farmers. On Zhen Tian's side, everyone raised their bows to attack. He gripped his bow tightly, aiming with precision. Hu Dalian gave a cryptic smile. "It seems they aren't a regular army. Don't they know accuracy drops when shooting from horseback?" He ordered without hesitation, "All of you draw your bows. When they get in range, turn them into porcupines for me." The soldiers obediently followed his command, aiming their bows high. Zhen Tian's side suddenly attacked, their morale soaring. Seeing this, Hu Dalian inwardly mocked their foolishness. Just as he finished his thought, a sharp arrow flew right past his face. It was followed by several more arrows, nearly costing Hu Dalian his life. His troops seemed to be at a disadvantage, unable to fight back at all. Hu Dalian could only gape, not believing his eyes. Zhen Tian was fully focused, aiming his bow at him. His eyes showed his resolve as he began to release the arrow. Hu Dalian swiftly and continuously dodged the deadly arrows. With half of his soldiers seemingly dead, he was left to fight alone. Hu Dalian couldn't take it anymore and shouted, "Damn it, spearmen, block the cavalry now." Immediately, soldiers appeared at his command. Zhen Tian also changed tactics, spearhead formation advance. His troops charged forward fiercely, holding long spears. Zhen Tian's troops charged towards the enemy at full speed. A fierce battle ensued with the constant clang of weapons clashing. Bodies were thrown into the air as fresh blood splattered everywhere. Zhu Dunlian watched anxiously. "What are you all doing? Attack the horses!" One soldier suddenly thrust his spear at Zhen Tian's horse, but the spearhead broke on impact. The soldier panicked. "What? These horses are completely covered in iron." Before him now was a mighty army. The soldier could no longer fight and just stood there frozen. Powerful hooves trampled over the corpses on the ground. The desperate pleas of soldiers could be heard everywhere. Zhen Tian ordered his troops to carry out the next phase of the encirclement plan. He suddenly turned back and called out Fu Lu's name. He confidently understood and accepted this important task. Zhen Tian nodded in agreement, showing his complete trust. Then he spurred his horse on. "We will rescue the farmers." A portion of the soldiers followed Zhen Tian and charged forward. Zhu Dunlian's soldiers blocked them, trying to stop them from achieving their goal. One soldier laughed happily. "The cavalry has retreated." Fu Lu responded, "What are you so happy about, you punk?" Then Fu Lu's soldiers, armed with shields and swords, suddenly attacked. Zhu Dunlian's soldiers immediately took a defensive stance and charged with their spears. The two sides clashed in close combat. The atmosphere was intense. Fu Lu's army had now penetrated deep into the camp. It seemed the advantage was shifting to his army as Zhu Dunlian's side was gradually losing control. As more soldiers fell, the sounds of screams and clashing weapons created a deafening roar. The number of soldiers on Fu Lu's side also decreased significantly. The two sides were locked in a stalemate for a long time. Spears and sharp points were the weapons brought into the fight. The battlefield became chaotic with dust and smoke filling the air. The pungent smell of blood filled the air, but the soldiers continued to fight. Almost all of Zhu Dunlian's troops were killed. The scene was one of utter devastation. Baron Anvin also appeared silently watching the attacking army. He broke out in a sweat. Looking at their armor, they're clearly not from the Imperial Army, so where on earth did they come from? Zhu Dunlian ran frantically towards Baron Anvin. He quickly urged, "You must retreat to the rear immediately." He replied bitterly, "Those bastards aren't even worth my time. Once I return to my territory, I will definitely come back with the kingdom's army." Another soldier also ran up to report. Zhu Dunlian immediately questioned, "That's right. Have our troops secured the escape route?" The soldier stammered, not daring to answer. Elsewhere, the captive women saw the current situation and were terrified. How did it come to this? Zhu Dunlian's soldiers lay dead where they fell, while the few survivors fled for their lives. A woman's eyes were now filled with despair. Wu De's group had reached the place where the innocent people were being held. Zhen Tian's group had also just arrived unexpectedly, encountering some foolish soldiers who were trying to flee. Over here, Wu De greeted him respectfully. "You've arrived, great emissary." He slowly praised them. "Well done. Protect the supply carts, and the Gui Ma Dui will return with me." Suddenly, one of the enemies with shifty eyes looked like he was up to something. He crouched down to light a fire, his voice trembling. "Damn it, to die like this is so unfair." That man looked towards the group of poor women. "You damn beggars." He held a torch in his hand, intending to burn the cage. The terrified women cried and begged endlessly. Wu De saw this and couldn't help but be alarmed. Meanwhile, danger was drawing closer. "You will all die in the agony of being burned alive." After a few seconds, Yuan Hui made his first move. He gathered primal energy in his palm, converted it, and the flame was extinguished. As his pupils reappeared, an orange glow began to fill them. The flame, as if it had a soul, began to change direction, frightening the man. What? Evil had to pay the price with the very flame it held in its hand. The heat was swirling around the man. A few minutes later, only a charred skeleton remained in the middle of the empty yard. No one could hide their horrified expressions. The girl suddenly screamed, "It can't be!" She secretly identified Yuan Hui as a wizard. Right now, two circles, one large and one small, were gathered in a corner of the camp. Fu Lu smirked triumphantly. In contrast, Zhu Dalian was on the verge of a mental breakdown, not expecting 600 troops to be reduced to just 100 in a single attack. Just then, Baron An Wen shouted angrily, "You bastards, do you know who I am to dare do this? I am a noble of the Ha Yan kingdom." Despite the threat, the guards' expressions did not change at all. However, Baron An Wen misunderstood. Of course, how could they dare be careless with a noble? "I'll just move forward and take control of the situation." He boldly gestured, "If you know the laws of war, you can't treat me like this. Where is your leader?" A dark figure slowly emerged from the crowd. The soldiers dutifully parted to form a small path for that person's arrival. Baron An Wen also cautiously observed the figure who was about to appear. Zhen Tian now stood at the head of the soldiers. The man still dared to speak to him as an equal. "Are you the leader?" "I am Baron An Wen of the Ha Yan kingdom." Zhen Tian did not answer, but waited with an indifferent gaze. He quickly grew impatient. "How dare you ignore me?" At this moment, Zhen Tian suddenly spoke liar. Wu Lu immediately reported, "Sir, he has not yet returned from the village." Zhen Tian paused for a moment, then ordered Li Suo, "Bring me that item." The old man slowly explained, "To use magic, you must speak the activation word." He gently lifted his large hand in front of him. In the tense atmosphere, Zhen Tian coldly recited the activation word. The situation was a bit confusing, causing Li Suo to stare wide-eyed as if he had misheard. Then Zhen Tian also felt a bit embarrassed. "Did you guys hear me?" Li Suo reminded him again, "Sir, the activation word is a specific word." The old man said in a serious tone, "Please repeat after me, interpret." Unexpectedly, Zhen Tian mispronounced interpret. Seeing no movement from his side, they became a little confused. Husselin then spoke up. "It seems the tide of battle has turned. Should we give it a try?" Baron An Wen asked. "Do you have a good idea?" After that, some sort of countermeasure was whispered to him. A sinister smile slowly appeared on his lips. Meanwhile, Riso was starting to lose patience. "You have to repeat every single word exactly." Zhen Tian obediently pronounced it, just as the old man said. A green light slowly pulsed on the surface of the ring. Riso was also pleased by this. Then Zhen Tian asked again, "Can you all hear me?" Riso answered on behalf of the group, "Yes." Seeing this, he seemed quite satisfied. "Very good." From the other side, Hyunju Yeon suddenly stepped forward. "I am the knight Hyunju Yeon, a retainer of the family of Count Anvin." Zhen Tian also introduced himself politely. "I am the grand emissary Gao Zhen Tian of the great Gao Lu Li Empire." He unconsciously asked the Gao Lu Li Empire. Zhen Tian nodded firmly. "That's right." This Hyunju Yeon began to ponder. There's no country with such a name, and to use the word empire so casually. What are these people plotting? Just then, Zhen Tian's voice cut through his thoughts. "Shall we continue?" He was a little annoyed. Why continue when the outcome has already been decided? He spoke casually, "But I have a request. I, the knight Hyunju Yeon." Wish to challenge you, the Grand Emissary Gao Zhen Tian of the Great Gao Lu Li Empire, to a duel. If I win, will you retreat? Zhen Tian deliberately dragged out his words. A duel, you say? I accept the challenge of a warrior. Hyunju Yan replied succinctly, my thanks. Behind him, Baron Anvin smirked to himself. The duel was arranged according to Ti Lu Ming's plan. He is a famous knight of the Ji Ma Kingdom. Capturing that guy as a hostage will be enough to turn the tables. The strongest warriors from both sides stepped into the center of the encirclement. Caution and reserve were clearly visible on Hyunju Yan's face. In an instant, he suddenly roared with fury. The longsword in his hand was instantly enveloped in a boundless aura, his cloak flying up from the sweeping inner energy. Riso realized in a panic a pseudo-aura. Why is someone with Imperial Guard level skills here? Hyunju Yan asked his opponent in a deep voice, are you ready? Zhen Tian stood calmly facing him, come on. But Riso was extremely anxious. Sir, he's a pseudo-aura user. The old man shouted desperately to him, retreat quickly. Hyunju Yan moved like the wind closing in on Zhen Tian. Too late. However, he didn't notice the killing intent glowing in his opponent's eyes. A clash rang out, and Hyunju Yan's blade snapped in two. Baron Anvin couldn't believe the situation hadn't gone as expected. Even Hyunju Yan was completely bewildered. How? How can a sword without an aura still emit one? Zhen Tian let out a contemptuous word, sloppy. In the distance, Baron Anvin came running, Knight Hyunju Yan. What kind of trick are you playing? He said as he grabbed the man's cloak. But no matter how hard he pulled, the other man didn't budge, and the truth that came into view seemed to turn Baron Anvin to stone. A very thin line of blood appeared on Hyunju Yan's face. The two halves of his face also slowly began to separate. Finally, a deadly crimson sprayed everywhere. Stray drops of blood stuck to Baron Anvin's skin. He trembled and collapsed next to the loser. The triumphant look in his eyes completely turned to ash. However, the footsteps of the person before him were drawing closer and closer. A chilling sound whispered right next to his ear. Is that enough for you? Zhen Tian looked at Baron Anvin as if he were a lowly insect. He said with disgust, too easy. Riso thought to himself, it was invisible to the naked eye, but the magical power I felt in that moment was not on the level of an ordinary pseudo-aura. Over there was Fu Lu laughing gleefully. Are there idiots here too who let their energy leak all over the place? The soldiers quickly burst into loud laughter. Zhen Tian coldly ordered them retreat. The army's response thundered, as you command. Fear still lingered in Riso's mind for treating a pseudo-aura user like a fool. Zhen Tian calmly rode his warhorse away through the crowd. Riso carefully hid his awe. Just what kind of blasted place is Gao Gu Li? The scene changes here. An early morning march is underway. Deep red flags fluttered in the wind. Riso was thinking with his eyes closed. I've racked my brains, but I still don't understand. I know more about the continent than anyone, so how could I not know about a group with this level of military power? Suddenly, Fu Lu approached. What are you thinking about? The old man spoke timidly. General, I have a question. Where are you all from? He answered nonchalantly. Didn't we already say we're from Gao Gu Li? Riso looked at him with a blank expression. Everyone knows that. The old man had to change his question. So where exactly is that place located? Fu Lu stroked his chin for a long time. We traveled by ship in one direction. No one knows where our camp is, but from there, it takes about 3 days by ship to get here. Riso felt a momentary joy. A 3-day ship journey from the lake, you say, if you travel like that. His mood quickly soured. Where else could it be but somewhere around this lake dumber than a herd of goat orcs? He suppressed his anger and continued, General Fu Lu, there's no way out of the lake, so how can you say it takes 3 days to reach Gao Gu Li? He replied blankly, that's true, isn't it? While crossing the stormy sea. The story continued for a few more minutes. Fu Lu told the story until he got sleepy, yawning again and again. On the contrary, the more Riso listened, the more confused he became, breaking straight through a water wall, rising from the sea to reach the lake in the Lugansk mountains. A thought flashed through his mind, leaving him stunned. Could it be? Soon they arrived at another place. The troops were temporarily stopped near the lake's surface. A soldier announced in a loud voice, the great messenger has arrived, open the gate. The rumbling sound of the moving gate echoed. Following that, the group slowly entered. Just then, the sound of someone approaching was heard from a distance. Xiang Shen rushed over. General, there is an urgent matter. He knelt on one knee and saluted before Zhen Tian. Then came the urgent report: soldiers have marched from the city with the intent to capture the farmers. We must quickly mobilize our forces to prepare for their attack. Zhen Tian's face was calm with a hint of coldness. The pressure from his gaze made the young man somewhat fearful, so Xiang Shen had to adopt a more respectful attitude. There is no time to hesitate. I have ridden here day and night without rest to report this. Despite his urgency, Zhen Tian remained unmoved. You turned your back on him decisively. Hong Shen called out in confusion, "Great envoy!" Just then he was scolded. "You liar, don't make a fuss after the fact." Fu Lu explained, "Don't you get it? You're beating the drum after everything is already over. We just wiped them all out and came back. Go change your clothes. You look like a beggar." They went inside one by one, ignoring Hong Shen. The sunset that day was shining upon the sky over the camp. A meeting was taking place inside. Hong Shen's voice was a bit heavy. With the sole determination to report back, I cut down all of my pursuers. Zhen Tian asked coldly, and then he told the story dramatically, but suddenly a giant two-headed thing started chasing me. Zhen Tian asked with a flat tone, and then he proudly puffed out his chest. But who am I? I shook it off with these swift feet of mine. His voice was very loud, his mind replaying the bizarre scene. Hong Shen's face looked fierce. There were thousands of green bastards trying to kill me. However, Zhen Tian's attitude remained indifferent, and then, even so, he still emphasized thousands of them. His confidence slowly faded. No hundreds of them. Zhen Tian stared at him, and then, now Hong Shen had started to lower it to dozens. Zhen Tian growled, and then Hong Shen stammered, unable to answer. Then Zhen Tian asked decisively, "So you threw away the things bought with the money from selling the pelts we collected for months?" Only now did Hong Shen realize that serious omission. He lowered his head in embarrassment, but after a moment he muttered, "If it wasn't for that guy named An Vin or something." Zhen Tian was very sharp and caught the key point. He turned to call his subordinate Hui. "Bring that bedwetter here." This made Hui a little confused. Zhen Tian specified that guy named An Vin or whatever. Soon after, Baron An Vin was brought in by the soldiers. He asked angrily, "Don't you know you can't do this to a noble of the kingdom?" A small light flashed on his ring. He paid it no mind and continued to yell, "According to international law, a nobleman captured as a prisoner of war must be treated according to their status." Zhen Tian immediately inquired, "Is what he's saying true?" Riso confirmed honestly, "It is true." After hearing that, he turned to look at Baron An Vin, and then he made a declaration, "I will treat him well." Baron An Vin also confidently proposed, "If you release me right now, I'll get a ransom of 1,000 gold, and I will also petition the king for autonomy in this region." Zhen Tian pondered for a moment. "Autonomy, huh? We really do need a comfortable place to settle down." Immediately he tried to entice them. "From what I can see, it seems you haven't pledged loyalty to anyone yet. I am willing to take you on as my subordinates." Fu Lu and Wu Lu were immediately angered. "That bastard dares to spew such words. Let me split his head open." Baron An Vin was startled by their aggression. "What are you doing?" Zhen Tian hurriedly commanded, "Do not be rude." They nodded in unison and stepped back, however they still glared and cursed him under their breath. Then Zhen Tian spoke up. "You said you would take us in." Baron An Vin promised, "I will give you the best possible treatment." He said nothing as he had to think for a moment. That hesitation made him smug. "See, if I just play my cards right, I can escape this situation and gain elite troops." Zhen Tian suddenly stood up. "Baron An Vin, you've been through a lot. My men, listen up. Untie him." Finally free, he instinctively touched his hands. Then he began to speak. "To recruit a talent like you, I don't mind enduring some hardship." "Isn't that a virtue for a lord?" he replied nonchalantly. "Thank you for your generosity. However, I do have one concern." Baron An Vin asked in surprise, "What is it?" His feet instinctively shuffled forward. Zhen Tian put a hand behind his back. "I'm afraid my subordinates might clash with the existing soldiers in your territory," he said gently. "Don't worry, there's only a security force in the territory right now anyway. I manage them directly, so how could there be any problems?" Zhen Tian continued, "And if this force arrives suddenly, food could become an issue." Baron An Vin smiled brightly again. "My estate has enough supplies to sustain this force for more than half a year." He also bowed slowly. "Thank you. Now please get some rest." Zhen Tian ordered again, "Remove the thing wrapped around his neck." A soldier stepped forward to carry out the order. Once that was done, Zhen Tian instructed, "Take him to where the able-bodied men among the captured farmers are." A soldier quickly complied. The three of them walked out of the council room. Only then did Riso dare to speak. "Sir, they're going to beat him to death." Zhen Tian gave a dangerous smile. "So what if he dies? That's his fate." Another order was given. "We prepare to march the morning after tomorrow." Riso was still a bit confused. "Sir, why the soldiers?" Zhen Tian replied cheerfully, "Why you ask? That liar has to pay back both principal and interest for the cart of goods he lost." Hui also gave a gentle smile. It seemed everyone felt satisfied by this. Zhen Tian added with a smirk, "While that bastard's territory is lightly guarded, this is our chance. Isn't looting one of the pleasures of war?" Meanwhile, Baron Anvin was screaming furiously, "You bastards! What is this attitude of yours? I'm about to become your lord. There must be some mistake. Open this door right now, you scoundrels." When no one reacted, he took his anger out on the cell, damn it. How do these idiots operate? As soon as he turned around, he realized the situation. Pairs of hateful eyes were fixed on him. The male farmers were standing in a large group. Baron Anvin said contemptuously, "You lowly creatures." He pointed to someone nearby. "You there. Bring me some water," he ordered with a flick of his hand. The man angrily stopped what he was doing. Baron Anvin sighed indignantly. He then unleashed his frustration on the man. The man slammed onto the prison floor, but Baron Anvin still wanted to torment him further. "You piece of trash." The powerful blow made him spit blood. A whimpering plea rang out, "Please spare me." The farmer named Hay was furious and wanted to rush out. "I'll kill you." However, his friend reminded him, "Didn't that soldier earlier say he would kill anyone who touched Baron Anwen?" The warning made Hay pause for a moment, but his eyes were clearly still filled with hatred. A hateful memory surfaced. It was the sound of a farmer being shoved to the ground. It was also the piercing scream of someone being finished off by soldiers. The entire scene was gradually becoming just like the current one in the prison. Hay still shouted resentfully, "Don't you feel wronged?" The crowd quickly quieted down a little, a dark and heavy atmosphere closing in around them. During this time, Baron An Wen had beaten the other farmer unconscious. He spoke aggressively. "What do you want, you bastard? How dare you glare at me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Hay lunged forward. The force of his punch sent Baron An Wen flying. He slammed into the cell wall and collapsed. Saliva and blood from his nose were spilling out. His initial arrogance immediately vanished. After getting up, he shouted, "Guards." However, a sound from behind him was getting closer. Baron An Wen stammered, "I'm sorry, let me explain first." Hay swung his arm ruthlessly. "I don't need empty apologies. Atone with your death." A fist immediately flew into his jaw. What followed was a shrill scream echoing from the barracks. The next morning, everyone was assembled in the courtyard. The farmers from the prison had been brought out. Standing above them was Hay, who was tightly bound. The person sitting on the high platform to pass judgment was Zhen Tian. He questioned coldly, "Why did you kill him?" Hay was silent, but didn't look away. Immediately, a hand grabbed his head. Then a guard shoved Hay down. He began to endure their heavy blows. Zhen Tian waited a moment, then asked again, "Why did you kill him?" Hay retorted angrily, "Are you saying I should have just stood by and watched my enemy?" A faint smile appeared on Zhen Tian's face. He said, "Revenge is a right granted to humans. Are you human?" Hay furiously yelled at him, "What?" A cruel voice rang in his ear. "Insects do not have the right to speak of revenge. Besides you, who else laid a hand on Baron An Wen?" Hay shouted again, "What are you talking about? I was the only one." Zhen Tian stared at the man below. Then he shifted his gaze to signal his subordinate. Hay was slowly helped up by the guards, and the two of them led him to another place. Fu Lu also quickly moved from his spot. He was following the soldiers escorting Hay. Back here, the other farmers were waiting in silence. Zhen Tian gave his cruel verdict, "The life of one noble is worth the lives of 10 insects. Now, if 9 more people volunteer to die, I will enslave the rest." The crowd shouted one after another, "It's me, let me be the one to sacrifice." However, this image is slowly fading. In truth, everyone was terrified. The reality is right now, Zhen Tian is approaching. He gave them a condition: if 9 more people sacrifice themselves, now I will spare the lives of the rest. Seeing no response, he asked again, "No one?" Those farmers all lowered their heads. Just then, one person stood up. "Can't you just kill me and spare them?" Zhen Tian said coldly, 8 more to go." The soldiers coldly moved forward to seize him. Before being taken away, he spoke, Even if you don't get enough people, I trust that you will spare my family." Jen Tian replied magnanimously, "I guarantee it." Then he resumed his cold expression 8 more steps forward. Meanwhile, He was being pinned down against a tree trunk. 2 guards were trying to restrain his movements. Fu Lu drew his weapon and said, "Hold him tight." He broke out in a cold sweat, waiting for him to approach. The opponent's shadow loomed over him. Terrified, He shut his eyes, trying to escape reality. A scream was heard along with a spray of liquid from behind the fence. The farmers were trembling with fear, but another pair of eyes shifted slightly. "That man stepped forward. If I come out, that leaves 7, right?" Jen Tian nodded in confirmation. More time passed at the judgment. Jen Tian's steady voice echoed 6. When the next person stood up, he counted again 5. Then he quickly waited for the next one 4. The weight of each word fell, and a chill enveloped everyone. Jen Tian clasped his hands and said, 4 more are needed. However, no one dared to raise their head. Knowing no one else would step up, Jen Tian gave the order. "Provide homes and livelihoods for the families of the 6 who sacrifice themselves. They will become my people. Seize the rest of them. They will all be slaves." Trash, he spat out the word and turned to leave. Sometime later, this is the soldiers' barracks. He was stirring weakly in his delirium. Right after, Veron called out happily, "You're awake." He asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" He replied softly, "It's a long story. We can talk after you've recovered." He was still a bit hesitant. "All right, but how exactly am I still alive?" Veron explained briefly, "It was a test." Hearing this, he was also confused. What kind of test? Veron slowly explained, "You and the 5 villagers who volunteered to sacrifice yourselves will live as normal citizens, with your families. The rest will live as slaves." He let out a quiet, troubled cry. "Oh no!" "But that pain, it felt like I died and came back. I was sure I was dead." Veron said to him with an awkward laugh, "You see, it seems he had no intention of killing you. He was just testing to see if you had even a shred of will." However, to make it look real, that was General Fu Lu. Hearing that name struck fear into him. It was the name of a giant dwarf carrying something. Veron hesitated for a moment before revealing a few things. "That's right. He used an acupuncture technique on his rear. He gave you a dose of his one-finger Zen. Indeed, at that moment, Xiong Sun had to pinch his nose. Why this? It's so dirty." Fu Lu asked coolly. "Do you want to know why?" Xiong Sun replied enthusiastically, "Of course." He began with a hidden meaning. "There is nothing I cannot tell you." A deep shadow fell over them as he brought his face close. "Try it on your chrysanthemum." Xiong Sun frantically fled from the danger, but his small collar was grabbed, and sweat quickly beaded on his forehead from the bad omen. Fu Lu's devilish smile widened. Finally, another miserable scream echoed through the military camp. The sun once again set below the treetops while the farmers were still tilling their fields. Nearby, 2 people were sitting and watching. Sarah called out Fu Lu's name and asked, "Why are those people slaves?" He answered thoughtfully, "When they were first recruited, the general said they had to pick up a sword to be accepted. If you can't sacrifice yourself, it will be the same when the enemy invades later on. Wielding a sword is the most fundamental thing for a person. That is what is most important." She was a little surprised to hear that. Fu Lu gazed into the distance and said, "I once asked the great messenger a similar question." His eyes were filled with nostalgia for the past. Back then, Jen Tian was standing on a cliff with Fu Lu standing a short distance behind him. At that time, Jen Tian said grimly, "Anyone can survive, but not everyone can enjoy freedom." Fu Lu replied naively, "That is too difficult to understand, Commander." He said calmly, "Look at the pigs locked in their pens. They just eat the food humans give them and repeat it until they die. But what about the ones living in the forest? When we try to catch them, they resist to live. But it is not just about survival. If we catch them and lock them in a pen, what will happen?" Fu Lu answered honestly, "They will ram their heads into the pen." Jen Tian's face lowered slightly. "That's right. Do you know why? Because they know freedom. Even beasts do their utmost for freedom. In the past, humans lived freely without nations or borders, following the teachings of Shen Huan Ren to benefit all of mankind. But that was short-lived. A bloody history began when traders grew greedy for their own prosperity, oppressing and taking away the freedom of others. Therefore, you must always remember the reason you wield a sword. Those without a reason cannot become strong. To protect freedom, you must wield a sword, and to wield a sword, you must know what freedom is." That is the difference in the weight of a sword wielded by one who knows freedom and by one who does not. Therefore let us wield our swords for the free will of Gao Gu Li." And so that beautiful memory came to a close. Fu Lu smiled. "We must wield our swords to protect. The weak cannot protect anything." The nearby women suddenly turned around, and the soldiers could not help but be stunned by the profound philosophy. Suddenly, Fu Lu's large hands moved. He gently patted her head. "Sarah, I will protect you." She savored his affection. "I like this the most." The scene changes to a hilly region. A troop of soldiers is marching through the mountains. Dust continuously sweeps through the forest, and a moment later a command is given, and the entire army halts. Riso immediately gasps for breath. They had covered a distance that normally takes a week in just 3 days, yet showed no signs of fatigue. The cavalry was one thing, but how could even the archers who traveled on foot handle their horses so skillfully? Just then a voice spoke from behind him. "Sir." Wu Lu reported succinctly, "The Grand Emissary summons you." He slowly followed the directions to a secluded spot. After stopping, he immediately raised his eyes to observe. His black cloak was fluttering in the wind. "Jen Tian," spoke Riso. "This place is different from the one we know." "No, the one you know. You and we are different, aren't we?" The old man confirmed it honestly. Then Jen Tian explained further. "The shape of the stars is different, the moon is different, and the language is different too." He added coldly. Riso said respectfully, "Although I have no magical abilities, I pride myself on having accumulated more knowledge than anyone." Jen Tian turned to look at the person speaking behind him. Riso mentioned in a low voice, "But in the world I know there is no empire named Gao Ju Li." Jen Tian had to probe, "Is there a Tang dynasty?" The old man maintained his previous attitude. "No, sir." Jen Tian asked again, "Do you know of any nations like Baekje, Silla Balhai, or Han?" Riso replied regretfully, "No, sir." A heavy silence immediately fell. Jen Tian asked heavily, "Where in the world are we, and what kind of place have we come to?" Riso spoke his true thoughts. "This is the Hein continent, sir. It seems you have crossed a spatial barrier. In other words, you have come to a completely different world. 10,000 years ago, the ancient dragon Bersha personally traveled the world and established coordinates across all lands. There is a type of magic called teleportation that allows for spatial movement using only these coordinates. However, the empires you mentioned are not within any of those coordinates, so I assume you come from another dimension." Jen Tian asked further, "What is an ancient dragon? How could it fly around to confirm that? Why do you trust it so blindly?" Riso cautiously looked up. The ancient dragons, a great race." The image of a magnificent dragon appeared in his mind. "We respectfully call them dragons." Jen Tian seemed to understand a little a god. Riso explained more clearly, "Not exactly, but on this land they are beings that no force can approach." At this moment, Jen Tian stunned the old man. "So they're just dragons." A winding form appeared with his words. "The shape is a bit different, but a dragon is still a dragon. Ridiculous, a world ruled by a few insignificant dragons." Riso dared not say anything more, as he was too surprised. Then Jen Tian pointed to his armor. "Do you know what this is?" He was referring to the symbol engraved on it. Riso was somewhat flustered. "What is a bird with 3 legs?" Jen Tian replied, "The symbol that lives in our hearts is called the 3-legged crow, a divine beast that preys on dragons." This terrifying knowledge shattered all of the old man's assumptions. He gently patted the old man's shoulder as if to offer some comfort. Next, Jen Tian said, "There's no need to fear those strange lizards, remember that." The old man turned back in confusion as if he wanted to say something else. But Jen Tian had already turned and walked away. Every one of his steps was slow and steady. At this time, the other soldiers were still waiting outside. He stood in the forest for a long time. Jen Tian unconsciously fell into deep thought, a place we can no longer reach. "You are so small in this strange world. A question arises, is this where we have to live from now on?" The stars in the sky are sparkling, but the forest below is unusually gloomy. Meanwhile, the soldiers are moving stealthily. They're heading for a spot quite close to the forest. One of them is chosen to be a foothold. The other guard immediately uses him as a launch pad. Their coordination helped him get high up on the fortress wall. More and more soldiers are making their way up. They scaled the fortress wall in no time. Next, they readied their weapons. At the same time, the fortress guards were complaining. "With all the main soldiers gone, we're stuck with tons of work. I'm about to die." He asked, "How can you be tired when you're always dozing off?" The man replied, "That's exactly why I can't sleep in a bed and have to sleep standing up." Just then he asked, "Why'd you stop talking?" When he turned around, he realized his comrade had been hit by an arrow. Next, his own mouth was covered. Xiong Shen quietly signaled him to be silent. He asked, "How many guards are there right now? If you answer honestly, I will grant you anything." He made a sound to signal his agreement. Satisfied, he released his hand from the man good. After catching his breath, he revealed 12 in total, and there are 5 more in reserve in the building before the wall. Xiong Shen asked cheerfully, "All right, what should I grant you?" The man said fearfully, "Please spare me." He seemed a bit puzzled. Is that all? The guard thought silently for a moment. Then he boldly said, "If possible, some money to settle down somewhere else." He asked again, "Is that all? Is that really all you want?" The guard started demanding more. "Give me a horse and a lot of money." Xiong Shen patted his shoulder amicably. "Of course." As he spoke, the man noticed something was wrong. "Thank you." His eyes immediately filled with panic. His voice trembled. "But you said you'd give me what I wanted." Xiong Shen acted surprised. "But I already have. If that's not enough, just say so. I will grant you everything." His screams faded. "You liar!" Finally, there was the sound of a body falling. Xiong Shen said with disgust, "How disappointing." The other soldiers thought in unison, "What a liar." A white light flashed on and off from the fortress wall. From the other side of the forest, they also saw that the signal had been given. The reins of the horses were gathered. Gentian's voice rang out, "Be very quiet and fast. Let's begin the raid on Anvin's estate." Now, with no guards left alive on the wall, the fortress's iron gate slowly opens. At the same time, the sound of hooves drew near as the troops began to enter. Gentian majestically led his troops. In front of him was the 5-man assassin squad that had been sent ahead. Xiong Shen was respectfully saluting him. Gentian ordered, "Leave this place to us, go protect the other gates." The 5 of them shouted in unison, "Understood." Following that, they quickly ran off to their duties. Gentian continued to instruct, "Each squad will spread out and approach the target, slowly eliminating any patrol guards in sight, no exceptions." The soldiers replied in unison, "As you command." He didn't forget to add attack immediately when the signal is fired. At the moment, only a small group of soldiers remained with him. His ruthless gaze shot forward. That place was the magnificent castle. He coldly spurred his horse forward. "Move out." The scene changes to the location where they were lighting a fire. Riso just sat there pensively watching the burning flames. It seemed his mood was very heavy. Earlier, Zhen Tian had instructed, "I will assign you a few soldiers. Stay here until the battle is over." The old man wondered, "What must I do?" He said casually, "What else you will be picking out the items?" The old man grew even more confused. "What do you mean, sir?" Zhen Tian explained, "We are going to raid the house of a man named Anvin. But a raid on that place will yield a mountain of goods. So, between you and me, who do you think knows which items are valuable?" Riso hesitated slightly. "Well, I would know better." "Is that the only reason?" He immediately replied, "In addition, you know more about books and documents. To be precise, we need those books and maps to survive in this place. Your mission is to find them." The fire burned fiercely as if searing his very soul. Riso muttered to himself, "The master has chosen to settle down here." A guard announced, "It's starting." Riso remarked, using a signal arrow to give the sign really. But he quickly realized, we have to get to the castle, hurry." The archer was confused. "Where are you suddenly running off to, sir?" Riso said in a panic, "It's my fault. A place this far from the capital will of course have a communication mage stationed here. I can't believe I didn't think of that." The soldier reassured him, "We will cut off the signal towers and messenger stations first. Do not worry, sir." However, the old man was furious. "You know nothing. That's magic, communication magic." The soldier's face remained confused, but Riso had already spurred his horse and galloped away. He charged out from the group all by himself. He was burning with anxiety. "I have to stop them before they contact the kingdom." His nerves were frayed, otherwise no one would be left alive. Riso pushed himself to go faster. The scene shifts back to the castle in the palace. Zhen Tian and his subordinates were eliminating the guards. A shout rang out from an opponent, "The mansion gate has been breached. Stop them!" However, Zhen Tian's formidable group had already swarmed in. His decisive murderous gaze swept over the soldiers. What followed was a swift and decisive wipeout of the enemy. In a flash, the guarding army was routed. But Zhen Tian declared, "Don't let anyone escape." With that, the troops quickly charged forward. They charged forward, sending the gate guards flying. They were trampled painfully under the horses' hooves. Zhen Tian carved a path straight through the chaos. A guard gritted his teeth in frustration. He roared in pain. Where did this cavalry come from? Next, Zhen Tian ordered Fu Lu to take control of the manor's interior. He replied decisively, "Understood, young master. Follow me." A group of them turned and ran towards the gate. Soon after Fu Lu had reached the steps, he kicked the large gate open with fierce force. The small troop of soldiers entered in a hurry. Fu Lu began his warning, "If a single rat escapes, you will all be held responsible." The soldiers split up in different directions to search. Fu Lu and two other soldiers came to a corridor where he found a door in the deepest part. His intuition kicked in the moment he opened the door. The dark path behind it convinced him this was the perfect place for rats to hide. They quickly descended the stairs. After a while, Fu Lu signaled for them to stop. He looked suspiciously into the darkness ahead. He finally ordered his subordinates to wait there. Then Fu Lu pressed his ear against the stone wall. A shout echoed out, "Why are you struggling so much?" His bow was immediately drawn taut. The group became more cautious than before. At the bottom of the stairs, another corridor appeared. A dungeon had been built there. The person inside also spotted them keenly. "Who's there?" The man was hit by an arrow as soon as he spoke. Fu Lu took down the suspect and approached. He carefully peered through the iron bars. The guards heard the command, "Bring a light over here." One of them found a torch. Then they scraped a spearhead against the wall to create a flame. The dark cellar was finally filled with a bit of light. Fu Lu could now get a good look at the person, but the prisoner had already lost consciousness, so he quickly aimed his arrow elsewhere. In the other part of the cell, someone was tied up. She looked completely drained of strength, yet her natural beauty was still enough to captivate any man. Fu Lu couldn't help but tease, "Little lady, a beauty like yours is enough to make any man's head spin." She lifted her head slightly, but still didn't look directly at him. On the contrary, this angle gave Fu Lu an even clearer view. He trembled inwardly, skin as white as jade-pointed ears, a reddish appearance could it be. The men all dropped to their knees at once. "We greet the Xian Nu." Inside the cold, damp stone prison, the gray walls seemed to swallow all sound. From behind the heavy bars, a rough hand grabbed Hai Li's long hair. The bald man pulled her hair tightly and uttered a threat, "Don't resist." Strands of hair fell, covering half of Hadia's face. Suddenly, a faint sound was heard, and the bald man immediately let go of her. He cautiously approached the iron bars, his gaze fixed on the dark void. Just then, an arrow shot straight towards the bald man. Seeing this, Hadia let out a soft breath, as if a weight had been lifted from her. "He's finally here, the one who will save her." In a hazy moment, a familiar voice echoed in her ear. "Well now, little lady, a beauty like this is enough to make any man dizzy." Hadia slowly opened her eyes. She tried to look at the people in front of her, a dwarf and a human, a dwarf that tall, and using a bow instead of an axe. At this thought, Hadia's body collapsed forward once again. Meanwhile, Fu Lu scanned her from head to toe. Skin as white as jade-pointed ears, a vague idea flashed through his mind. That appearance could it be? Immediately after, Fu Lu prostrated himself on the ground. He hurriedly shouted, "A fairy!" At the unexpected sight, Hadia's eyes widened in astonishment. "The proud children of Mother Earth are bowing to me. Am I dreaming?" The scene shifts to a pitch-black castle. Soldiers were seen subduing the enemy with their spears. After a while, the group was all tied up, each one wearing an expression of agony. The enemy dazedly turned to look in one direction. Before him was Zhen Tian, who appeared with a cold expression. At the same time, a subordinate ran over in a hurry, "General, we have cut down everyone who appeared to be from Aubin's family." Hearing this, the enemy couldn't help but feel bewildered, mercilessly slaughtering even the family of a nobleman, something that even common bandits wouldn't dare to do. He glanced at Zhen Tian in horror. Who on earth are they? At that moment, he remained silent, but his body radiated a dense killing intent. After a moment of silence, Zhen Tian gave a stern order, "Gather the corpses." The subordinate quickly replied, "Yes, sir." After speaking, he glanced around in doubt, his pupils constricting. Just then, a group of people rushed towards Zhen Tian. The one who had just arrived was Riso. He shouted, "General." He replied in confusion, "Riso." At this moment, he quickly dismounted from his horse. Seeing Riso's breathless state, Zhen Tian asked curiously, "What's wrong? I haven't even given the signal yet." After catching his breath, he quickly proposed the communication. "We must stop the mage's communication." Hearing this, he was still confused. "What do you mean?" Riso said urgently. There's not much time, so I'll explain later, but if we ask Baron Aobin's family or retainers, he instinctively stepped back, his eyes showing clear horror. That is. The subordinate casually presented the head to Riso, saying lightly, "We didn't miss a single one." Seeing him still in a daze, Jen Tian turned to confirm, "It seems so." "Of course." A shout echoed from the distance, "General." Fu Lu ran out frantically shouting, "General." Jen Tian's gaze fell on the person on Fu Lu's back. He ran over quickly and announced at the same time, "I've rescued a fairy." He looked behind him doubtfully. "A fairy?" Riso stared at Hadia in shock. "Why is an elf here?" He quickly warned Fu Lu, "The one on your back isn't human." Hearing this, he got angry. "You idiot! How can you compare a fairy to a human?" Hearing this, Riso's voice trembled, looking at her with worried eyes. "A fairy, no, that's—" Before he could finish his words, Zhen Tian suddenly lowered his voice. "Wait!" He immediately reacted to the warning, his eyes widening. He looked coldly towards the pillar of light. On top of the tower, the energy is starting to gather. Seeing this, Riso shouted in fear, his body recoiling. "Oh no!" Faced with Riso's intense reaction, Zhen Tian looked skeptical. "What is it?" "It's nothing our soldiers can't handle." He quickly explained, "That's communication magic. It's a type of signal fire that sends news instantly from here to the capital." Seeing the magic gathering, it's already too late to pursue. An unknown figure was seen frantically casting a spell around the orb. Zhen Tian was silent, looking thoughtfully at the opponent. A while later, Zhen Tian turned towards him Fu Lu. Fu Lu carefully placed Hadia's body on the ground. His gentle action left her slightly bewildered. At that moment, Fu Lu slowly moved the arrow towards his target. He stared ahead with a serious expression, his bow drawn taut. Witnessing this, Riso intended to stop him, but could only utter, "Impossible." From this distance, even an elf's arrow would have trouble reaching. "We can only run." Fu Lu didn't back down. He strained his eyes to look at the target. Right after Fu Lu decisively shot the arrow, it flew straight towards the orb. The body of the bow was seen vibrating the moment the force was released. At the same time, the arrow sliced swiftly through the layers of wind. Instantly, the pillar of light exploded, and a massive amount of light spread outwards. The man on top of the tower also tumbled backwards. His body was seen slowly falling straight down. Over here, Fu Lu still wore a cold expression. Riso looked towards the top of the tower in astonishment. The demonic energy has vanished. Hadia couldn't help but feel a little confused in arrow that even I, a great elf, couldn't see. A few hours later, the enemy's corpses were scattered on the ground. At the same time, a group of soldiers was focused on stacking wooden boxes. Just then, Fu Lu shouted with authority, "Move it!" Then he quickly stepped outside, his voice ringing with annoyance. "What is it?" "Can we sell these strange things for money?" The soldier hesitated and replied, "I'm not sure." Just then, a scream rang out from the crack in the door. "Nope." Without a second thought, Fu Lu casually threw the door open. "What's wrong?" At that moment, Riso was frantically tearing at his own hair. He hissed through his teeth, "My concentrated man ret essence. Do you have any idea how much this is worth?" Fu Lu was momentarily embarrassed. He asked naively, "What the hell is a manret? What is that?" Riso suddenly turned. He yelled in a low voice, "Everyone get out!" Seeing this, Fu Lu was almost stunned. He wore a dazed expression. Riso rushed forward. He urged incessantly, "I'll take care of this place myself." As soon as the group was chased out, the door immediately slammed shut. Inside, Riso clutched the liquid on the floor. Heartbrokenly, he screamed his lungs out. It didn't stop there. Riso opened his mouth and wailed miserably. The screams just like that echoed throughout the room, and also traveled outside. A few minutes later, the subordinate turned to report, "General, we've brought out all the valuables." Fu Lu turned to look at the soldiers. He suddenly waved his hand and commanded, "Bring all those sets of armor over there here." The subordinate asked back in surprise, "What do you intend to do with those things?" He casually said, "We can melt them down to make arrows. Our army is short on iron." He nodded awkwardly. "Yes, sir." Immediately after, the subordinate turned to announce, "General Fu Lu said to take this pile of scrap iron with us." He also reminded, "Besides this, bring out every piece of iron you can find." The group shouted in unison, "Yes, sir." Over here, Zhen Tian fell into a state of deep thought for a moment. He stared at the pile of raw materials. The carts won't be enough. "Take 40 soldiers and distribute the remaining grain to the people. Focus on giving it to those who look especially destitute." The subordinate nodded slightly, "As you command." Jen Tian pointed in a direction. Remember to flatten or smash those other things completely before loading them onto the carts. He replied again, as you command. Immediately after, the group began frantically striking down. Witnessing that scene, the knight couldn't help but lament a full suit of armor worth more than 10 years of living expenses is being treated like this. A few minutes later, the armor was beaten to the point where its shape was unrecognizable. Seeing this, the man had to whistle in admiration. They're really good at smashing them. The person next to him chuckled, all right. In a small corner, the ground suddenly began to shake. From below, a hand suddenly shot upwards, followed by an arm fumbling on the ground. A moment later, Gerard managed to pull himself out of the earth. He smirked a smug look on his face. Finally, a successful infiltration. At the same time, Jen Tian's group stared at Gerard with looks of stunned hostility. He scrambled to his feet, looking around with surprised eyes. Gerard suddenly swung his sword forward. I am Gerard of the Flash, who will be the first to challenge me. In response, he was met with disdainful gazes from the crowd. Gerard froze, putting on an expression of pure innocence. Oh, hey there. Just then, Jen Tian shouted coldly, seize him. Gerard let out a teary-eyed sigh. Even the most famous mercenaries bow their heads at the sound of his name, yet here he was being treated so poorly. He tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword. Gerard shouted once more. The greatest treasure hunter on the continent and one of the 10 great swordsmen, Gerard the Windflash. The moment he finished speaking, a volley of arrows flew straight at him. A long streak of blood appeared on Gerard's face. The soldiers aimed their arrows directly at him. Arrows were now stuck in the ground all around Gerard's feet. He immediately tossed his sword aside and forced a smile. I surrender. In the dark field, Gerard was bound and kneeling, surrounded by 4 soldiers, their cold steel blades signaling tragedy. He raised his head to look at the soldiers with black hair and black eyes. In all his travels across the continent, Gerard had never seen people with clothes or physical features like theirs. Just then, Gerard unconsciously glanced in one direction. He saw a group of soldiers furiously smashing some sets of armor. Witnessing that scene, he was completely stunned. Gerard roared in outrage, his voice echoing across the land. You black-clad bastards, do you have any idea how much that's worth? Hearing this, Jen Tian called out in a powerful voice, Hey, grave robber! Gerard immediately reacted with intense indignation. I'm a treasure hunter. It's a respectable profession dedicated to exploring dungeons. A treasure hunter, you say? Right, a grave robber. Is that plate armor really that expensive? He hissed furiously through his teeth. Damn it. Expensive doesn't even begin to describe it. A common family could live for 10 years on the cost of just one of those sets. Its intricate patterns and craftsmanship put ordinary plate armor to shame. Armor like that? As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers stomped on the armor even more forcefully. The scene was absolutely horrifying. Gerard screamed his lungs out, Stop it! Seeing this, Jen Tian turned to his men and said in a low voice, That's enough. Stop for now. Just then, Fu Lu stepped outside. He spoke slowly. General, don't worry. Fu Lu grinned smugly. The soldiers were too late, so I took care of the rest. Witnessing the scene, Jen Tian's expression darkened. Meanwhile, Gerard's body went stiff as he moaned about his precious living expenses. As a treasure hunter, Gerard usually made money by conquering dungeons. But during wartime, he tried to lay low and scrape by with odd jobs. Hearing that Baron Aben was leading his troops to the Lagangia Mountains, Gerard came here hoping to make a small profit. For him, the greatest treasure hunter on the continent looting an empty house was child's play. The situation took a very unexpected turn, and Gerard unintentionally became the soldier's target. The long gash on his face made his body go rigid. For a swordsman like Gerard, escaping would have been no trouble at all. However, the reason he surrendered so easily was due to an occupational hazard curiosity. Gerard secretly devised a bold plan. He would thoroughly investigate the identities of these strange people. Gerard asked angrily, Hey, why did you hit me? Jen Tian replied in a loud voice, Do not speak so informally. And from now on, be sure to tell us more important things like that. Hearing this, Gerard became defiant. He struggled against his bonds. Why should I tell you people anything? After speaking, Gerard fell into deep thought. He would only endure this until his curiosity was satisfied. But he had also discovered something. At that moment, the corner of his mouth unconsciously curled into a sinister smile. Gerard shot up, staring intently at Jen Tian. That guy holds a grudge over the smallest things. Inside, Riso spoke in a low, somewhat weary voice. That is a wise choice. At the same time, Jen Tian turned to look at him with a puzzled expression. Riso carefully made a suggestion. In times of war, money loses its value, and the state is collecting every bit of scrap iron to send to the empire, so it's best to just melt them down. Furthermore, we'll profit more by using it to craft and sell dwarven armor. Jen Tian's face immediately lit up, and he broke into a satisfied smile. I understand. Then Jen Tian looked towards the dark sky. The sun is about to rise. Let's head back. As soon as the words were spoken, the group quickly headed straight for the castle. The scene changes to a very crude and old house. At the same time, the man stopped in front of some strange bags. He was momentarily stunned and then exclaimed, "Bread and grain, wait. Who left this stuff here?" Just then, an old man rushed over. "Hey, something terrible has happened. Baron Alban's mansion has been completely destroyed. It's full of dead bodies inside." Hearing this, the man looked bewildered. "Who was it?" The old man shook his head. "We don't know yet." He rested his chin on his hand thoughtfully, letting out a curse. It's good that damn Baron Alban is dead, but another one just like him will probably come to replace him, right? At that moment, the man instinctively looked towards the strange bags of food. He was silent for a moment, then spoke hurriedly. Hey, but at least we finally have enough food to survive this winter." The old man sighed. "That's true, but..." The group glanced around the corners of the house where food was piled high. The man expressed his gratitude. "Whoever you are, thank you." After speaking, he gave a grateful smile. Elsewhere, Jen Tian vaguely felt a sense of warmth, and he unconsciously smiled. A while later, the group rode on horseback past the cliffs. Suddenly, a wheel hit a rock on the road. The cart immediately shook, and Gerard screamed violently. Amidst the crowded procession, he shouted in a strained voice, his sound overpowering everything, "Stop!" The group nonchalantly ignored Gerard. He sighed helplessly. Riding in this cart is torture. After a while, the group stopped. Some soldiers went to check the wheels. Gerard spoke quickly, his tone full of dissatisfaction. "Seriously, even new recruits could build something better than this. Do they think anything round counts as a wheel around here?" One of them sighed in frustration. "This is going to be a problem." The person next to him suggested, "For now, let's just report to the general." The man nodded and replied quickly, "Yes, sir." At the same time, Gerard stared intently at the group. He strained his eyes to look at them. A thought rising in his mind, I really don't know what to do about this. Of all the places to go, why are we heading towards the dangerous Lugansk mountains? The cavalrymen are wearing full-scale armor down to their ankles, and even their horses are covered in scale armor from head to hoof. But the strange thing is, their magical energy feels very unfamiliar. Even for a swordmaster like me, it's very difficult to gauge their skill level. If I make one wrong move, escaping will be nearly impossible. As the thought ended, Gerard once again looked dazed. He smirked, worrying about nothing again. This really isn't like me. Immediately after, Gerard stealthily pushed himself up to a standing position. A soldier banged on the wooden bars. He warned in a harsh voice, "Stay put." Seeing this, Gerard didn't respond. He just calmly smirked. Immediately after, Gerard suddenly burst out, and the wooden cage was smashed to pieces. He just swung his body, and the ropes instantly snapped in two. Witnessing this scene, the soldiers hurriedly shouted, "The prisoner is escaping." Gerard leaped down from above. Seeing this, the group of soldiers once again raised their bows and arrows towards him. Unlike before, Gerard showed no fear. He kept smiling. Just as the arrow flew at him, Gerard smoothly dodged to the side. Afterwards, he ran frantically despite the metal fragments flying at him. Gerard suddenly leaped high into the air, kicking the driver hard at the same time. He quickly jumped inside some wooden crates. Then Gerard hurriedly searched for something in his bag. He fumbled around for a moment, and a streak of light flashed. Gerard raised his arm, revealing a jade bracelet. He explained in a low voice. A knight stepped forward. He shouted in a harsh voice, "Calm the other prisoners, dismount, and subdue that guy now." Seeing this, Gerard smiled with satisfaction. A direct hit. The knight continued to command form a perimeter around him, so he can't grab anything to use as a weapon. Gerard sighed in frustration. He muttered under his breath, "Oh dear, what should I do?" Gerard excitedly pulled out a metal blade. "I have a sword right here." The men couldn't help but feel a little bewildered. How could such a big sword come out of that tiny bag? Gerard leaped down below, casually provoking them. Now then, Gerard stared at the men. He tightened his grip on the hilt. "Guess it's time to slip away." He suddenly rushed towards the group of men. First was the knight he immediately blocked with the sword in front of him. Gerard didn't hesitate to slash straight down at him. An unparalleled hatred flashed in his eyes. Below, the knight wore an expressionless face, his gaze unwavering. Seeing this, Gerard leaped back, or more precisely, back to his starting point. He stared wide-eyed at the men, completely bewildered inside. I thought they'd be slow because they're wearing full-body scale armor, but they blocked me that easily. I can accept it from the general. Let's see about the soldier. Thinking this, Jared rushed in to attack once more. He aimed straight for his opponent, swinging his blade at the same time. Only a streak of light was seen appearing in midair. Right after, the sound of clashing metal created an extremely jarring clang. At the same time, the group of soldiers quickly rushed to approach Gerard. Frantic slashes rushed towards him. In a flash, Gerard was completely pushed back to his starting point. Seeing this, he got so angry, he swore, "Damn it, what the hell is up with even the soldiers?" The group of soldiers stared at Gerard, their gazes unwavering. He glanced warily behind him. There were more soldiers dressed exactly like them. Gerard started to feel tense. It seems breaking out of here will be difficult. Damn it! He tightened his grip on the hilt, a resolute thought flashing in his mind. But giving up is not my style. Thinking this, Gerard grinned, his eyes burning with determination. Without any hesitation, he rushed towards the enemy. Seizing the opportunity, Gerard slashed down at a soldier. The sword in his hand was immediately knocked into the air. In that moment, Jen Tian was silently observing him from behind. He stared at Gerard and couldn't help but exclaim, "He's pretty useful." Fu Lu, who was beside him, also nodded in acknowledgement. Very impressive, his swordsmanship is very well balanced. Jen Tian then corrected him. No, I'm not talking about his swordsmanship, but about his courage. He understood instantly. It was his courage. He clearly finds this escape difficult, yet there's no hesitation in his blade. This is going to take a while. Fu Lu gently added, in any case, the Demon Armor Squad can't use its full strength on land. He suddenly made a suggestion. How about sending out a decent swordsman to test him? Hearing this, Jen Tian turned to him doubtfully, his eyes asking the question, "Do you have someone?" Fu Lu was silent for a moment, then replied, "The liar is the most suitable one." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiang Shen let out a small cough. Over here, Jen Tian was silent, his intense gaze on him saying everything. He looked towards Xiang Shen. "Are you talking about the liar?" Just then, Rizzo rode closer on his horse and asked, curiously, "What's happening back there?" Jen Tian didn't look at Rizzo. He just answered curtly in a cold tone, "We caught a tomb raider in the city, and he was trying to escape." Hearing this, Rizzo instinctively squinted ahead, feeling a strange mix of confusion and familiarity. That face looks a bit familiar. At the same time, Gerard launched a furious counterattack, the sound of clashing metal ringing out fiercely. A moment later, he suddenly changed direction, his body tumbling to the other side. The tip of the sword was seen lunging toward the knight. A soldier immediately rushed forward, quickly swinging his sword. In that instant, the knight suddenly aimed his sword vertically at Gerard. He immediately fell to the ground, his legs kicking up into the air. Gerard brazenly kicked the sword hard with his bare foot. The soldiers began to get angry, all of them looking furious. Just then, he suddenly spun on his toes. A circle formed looking just like a magic array. Gerard raised an eyebrow and thought this wasn't their first time cooperating. The more time they wasted, the greater his disadvantage. In that case, then he suddenly pointed his sword to the sky, and furious bolts of lightning shot out. Gerard gripped his sword tightly, roaring in a deep voice, "Let's see you block this!" Before this unexpected sight, the knight unconsciously fell back, yelling hurriedly, "Be careful!" At this moment, Gerard slashed down without hesitation. "You think being careful is enough?" The knight's face was now visibly tense. In a flash, the sword in Gerard's hand slashed down, overpowering the other blades. He gathered his strength, gritting his teeth. "You managed to block my sword without even using a sword aura." At that moment, a strange blue light flashed in Gerard's eyes. His entire body erupted with intense lightning, as if it were the end of the world. On the other side, the soldiers were so overwhelmed by the blue aura that they couldn't move. Just then, he quickly approached, his voice booming, "This is no time to hold back." Back with Rizzo, he looked on in shock. That is Lei Dian the Great. As soon as he finished speaking, Jen Tian immediately turned to inquire, "You know him?" Rizzo spoke quickly, his tone extremely urgent. "He is one of the 10 great swordsmen of the continent, and the only swordmaster among the unbound freelance knights. We must stop him immediately. Meanwhile, his body began to radiate a massive aura, overwhelming all the soldiers. After a moment, Gerard came to a stop right in front of someone. He suddenly smashed his hard head into the soldier's head. Seizing the opportunity, Gerard stabbed down decisively. Farewell. At that very moment, a pillar of light erupted. The whole area was nearly blinded as a streak of light shot forward and pierced right through him. The streak of light flared violently, blinding Gerard as his body was knocked backward, and he stammered, "Whoa, what?" Xiang Shen slowly stepped forward and shouted, "Everyone get back, I'll deal with this." His gaze fell upon the sword in Xiang Shen's hand. Gerard narrowed his eyes in deep thought. He blocked my longsword with such a fragile-looking blade. This man is very strong. Xiang Shen pointed his sword directly at Gerard and announced loudly, "I am Kui Xiang Shen, let's have a duel." The two quickly stood up, their eyes locked on one another. At that moment he opened his mouth and let out a roar. The sword in Gerard's hand immediately began to glow. Witnessing this, Xiang Shen remained unfazed, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Seeing this, he was so furious, he nearly lost his mind. How can you still be smiling after seeing this aura? The ground beneath Gerard's feet was completely devastated. Over here, Xiang Shen grinned with an amused expression. It's Jian Gang. He couldn't help but feel a bit bewildered. What? His mind was thrown into turmoil. Jian Gang. What is Jian Gang? Gerard's hand tightened on his sword hilt, and he nearly screamed Jian Gang, or whatever it's called. Gerard charged toward Xiang Shen without the slightest hesitation. "Here I come." Seeing this, he immediately stepped back, and the ground trembled slightly. He lowered his body, his excited gaze fixed on him. Meanwhile, Gerard was gritting his teeth so hard he was trembling. Instantly, Xiang Shen slashed down with his sword. Gerard's body suddenly staggered backward. He swung his sword toward him without hesitation. Xiang Shen suddenly used a movement technique. He dodged to avoid the slashes from Gerard. Xiang Shen was seen leaping into the air. At the same time, he subconsciously stared at the sword in his hand. The lightning suddenly erupted fiercely, and the entire space seemed to shake. Then Gerard quickly launched an orb. A moment later, his body was still trembling uncontrollably. On the opposite side, Xiang Shen remained motionless, smiling nonchalantly. Seeing this, he gritted his teeth in anger until they bled. Then Xiang Shen suddenly turned and left the battle. Gerard angrily demanded, "What? Are you looking down on me after just one round?" Xiang Shen didn't reply. He suddenly bent down. Xiang Shen was seen quickly drawing his sword from its sheath. Faced with this unexpected sight, he was almost frozen solid. Meanwhile, he slowly lifted his toes back. In the middle of the battlefield, a swirling current of mana suddenly awakened, twisting into vortexes. Seeing the terrifying scene, Gerard froze for a moment, completely bewildered. The mana around here. A thought flashed through his mind. He frowned slightly. Gerard pointed his sword upwards, and lightning quickly flared up. He leaned forward while gripping his sword tightly. In that instant, an invisible wave swept across the battlefield. After a while, the space returned to its usual peaceful state. Back to Xiang Shen, he had held the same posture for several minutes. Gerard wore a look of utter bewilderment, as the air itself frozen. The entire space suddenly fell silent. At the same time, Xiang Shen slowly turned around. His hand still gripped the sword, the force of his grip growing stronger. Xiang Shen turned slightly on his heel, his eyes fixed on him. Immediately after, he slashed forward frantically. Over here, Gerard was almost stunned silent, his body rigid and unable to move. He hastily pointed the tip of his sword at Xiang Shen. Back to reality, Gerard couldn't help but feel a bit confused. Was that an illusion? Just then, a crack suddenly appeared on the sword in his hand, and a piece of metal broke off and fell straight to the ground. Immediately after, the entire space began to shake violently. In the blink of an eye, the trees began to fall to the ground one by one. Across from him, Hongshen stared at Gerard with an ice-cold gaze. He slowly turned to look behind him. The West's face was deathly pale, and he let out a little chuckle. Seeing this, Hongshen sheathed his sword, confused by Gerard's reaction. The two of them stood still, their eyes locked with hostility. After a moment, he raised his sword before Hongshen. "I respect your sword." Hearing this, he let out a helpless sigh and smirked, "You as well." After speaking, they looked up at each other, their gazes softening slightly. Gerard turned to leave, casually asking, "So, shall we continue?" Witnessing this scene, the group of soldiers was momentarily confused. He then looked at his sword regretfully. Damn it, this thing was expensive. With that, Gerard casually tossed the sword towards a wooden crate. He walked quickly towards the wooden crate and ordered, "Come on, let's move out." Right after, Gerard shuddered and collapsed onto the wooden surface. Seeing that the group hadn't moved, he yelled in frustration, "What is everyone doing? Hurry up and go." Seeing this, Jen Tian gave a stern order, "Tell that bastard to run over here." After a while, the convoy continued to move along the bumpy road. Meanwhile, the West was tied up behind being dragged forward. Faced with this miserable situation, Gerard angrily cursed, "Goddammit!" The scene changes to a vast mountain range. In a small corner of the forest, a group of soldiers gathered together. The three of them looked at each other and shouted their slogan, "Let's begin." One of them decisively plunged a dagger into the ground. The other two immediately followed suit. They were seen stabbing frantically. After a long while, the group stopped their strange actions. The man suddenly shouted, his eyes lighting up, "It's out!" The soldiers looked at each other happily, everyone excited finally. The man quickly took out a small jar. Well then now. Just then a dark figure appeared, as if it were swallowing them whole. Upon seeing the strange person, the group let out an involuntary groan. They spun around and prostrated themselves on the ground. "General Fu Lu, please spare our lives. We only made this with leftover grain. We just saw the wine was ready, and we're going to offer it to you. Please believe us." As soon as the words were spoken, the area suddenly fell silent. Seeing this, the man cautiously raised his head to look across. Before him was Gareth, who was looking at them with a blank expression. After a moment, he excitedly tipped the cup of wine into his mouth. The corners of his mouth curved up in satisfaction. "This brewed wine is delicious." "Is this called rice wine? It looks like soup, but goes down so smoothly. It's really pleasant." One of them spoke up, "Sir, do you know how scared we were just now? We thought you were General Fu Lu." Hearing this, he laughed heartily. "I saw someone sneaking around and thought they were an enemy, so I gave chase." The other person asked cautiously, his eyes glinting with curiosity, "So what does the wine in this world taste like?" Gareth stared into the cup of wine, his voice tinged with a bit of regret. "This is pretty good, but as expected." Hearing this, the long-bearded man excitedly cut in, "That's right, as expected, it's—" The group gathered together and shouted as if reciting a command, "Beer is the best." They all looked at each other, then turned to him in unison with baffled looks on their faces. "Beer. What is that?" The old man gave a mysterious smile. "There is such a thing." Gareth grinned, unable to help but exclaim, "That's right." That tingling feeling on the tongue. The man spoke hesitantly, "This thing called beer. We'd also like to try it someday." Hearing this, Garland hesitated and said, "Actually, The old man suddenly coughed. "Hey, Garland." He put on a serious face. "As members of the Earth tribe who have been treated to rice wine, we must return the favor right." The scene changes to a hut made of weeds. Inside, a group of soldiers excitedly downs their mugs of beer. One of them spoke with a trembling voice after taking a sip. "How can it have a flavor like this? Is this what you call beer?" The man was both curious and excited. "Did you make this incredible stuff with your own hands? It's truly amazing. But what are the ingredients for the beer?" Garland answered casually as if it were obvious, the ingredients. "It's barley, of course." The atmosphere suddenly went still for a moment. Then he asked curiously, "Then may I ask where you got that barley from?" He answered without any hesitation, "From the warehouse." Long Hair quickly covered his mouth and forced a laugh. "Garland, my friend, you're drunk." The man immediately reacted. "So that's why there hasn't been any barley on the menu these past few days." As soon as he said it, the group practically froze. Another person urgently shouted, "If we're discovered, we're all dead." Another chimed in, "That's right. This is completely different from gathering leftover rice to make wine." Seeing this, Garland tried to reassure them. "Don't worry. Our chieftain is always upright and honorable, no matter what anyone says. I'll take care of everything. Come on now. Just drink up. I told you it's fine." However, their bodies were still trembling uncontrollably. He said nonchalantly, "In the world of dwarves, there's a saying, getting caught is a crime. Getting away with it is a skill." At that very moment, a familiar voice rang out, "You've been caught." Fu Lu suddenly appeared from behind, looking at the group coldly. Fu Lu raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. "Your names mean stone, don't they?" With that, Fu Lu commanded in a low voice, "You 3 stones step forward now." The scene changes to the next morning, with the group working hard tilling the fields. The old man couldn't help but exclaim, "This is the first time in my life I've seen dwarves farming." Varan smiled. "I've never heard of it either." Long Hair was seen frantically digging with a hoe. Over here, Garland was sweeping the ground. Meanwhile, the old man was diligently sowing seeds. At that moment, Fu Lu shouted, "You stones, get this done before nightfall, you hear me?" He didn't forget to add a threat. "If you want to live, work yourselves to death, you hear." As night fell upon the deep forest, the encampment appeared like a lonely island in a sea of dark trees. The flickering light from the fires illuminated the figures of the soldiers on watch. In that space, Hedaya sat quietly, her pale skin standing out in the dim light. Opposite her were three men, each with a completely different aura. After a moment of silence, Jen Tian turned and ordered Riso ask her why she was captured there. His voice came out slowly, filled with respect, to the child of the ancient forest, the embodiment of harmony, who possesses eyes that see through to the essence of all things. The human mage, Ricole Ciaron, sends his greetings. Hedaya bowed her head slightly, her voice soft and clear, echoing the depths of the forest. To Lord Riso, a piece of chaos and a child of mana, Hedaya of the High Elf tribe offers her gratitude. A soft gasp escaped from Riso, unable to hide his astonishment. A high elf? Why would a noble high elf suffer such hardship? Compared to humans, they are like deities. Hedaya spoke slowly, her gaze distant, as if reminiscing. We high elves often travel among the common elf tribes to bless their newborn children. During that time, she was accidentally captured in the territory of Baron Anvin. There was a rare item there, mana-locking cuffs, so Hedaya was unable to escape. Riso continued in a low voice, his eyes turning sharp. Although elves are peace-loving by nature, if you mess with a high elf, they become a fearsome force of vengeance. He couldn't have been ignorant of that. How does Baron Anvin intend to deal with the consequences? Over here, Jen Tian nodded slightly, a spark of understanding in his eyes. I see. Suddenly, Fu Lu turned and casually suggested, "Hey master, let me borrow that ring." The old man growled, "Fu Lu." Jen Tian angrily criticized him. "Do you think that is your master's relic? How dare you ask to borrow it for personal reasons? Does that make any sense?" He immediately bowed his head, his voice small but sincere. "I'm sorry. But the great messenger also." He let out a slight cough. "Why bring that up?" At that very moment, Hedaya suddenly stood up. Her body moved slightly as Hedaya slowly walked towards Fu Lu. Then she suddenly placed her hands on his head. Before Fu Lu could react, Hedaya moved closer, their foreheads touching. Right after, she whispered softly, like a song, "Uen hien sarun di ele diem." As soon as the words were spoken, a streak of light flashed in the darkness. Witnessing that scene, both Rizzo and Jen Tian were momentarily stunned. The two soldiers outside instinctively turned to look where the light came from. In that instant, the flash of light formed a rainbow. After a while, Hedaya slowly pulled away from Fu Lu. Faced with the unexpected sight, he fell into a daze. She bowed her head once more, the gesture gentle, yet filled with deep respect. Hedaya, Vikimia of the High Elf tribe, sends her greetings to the descendant of the noble warrior. As soon as she finished speaking, Fu Lu exclaimed in surprise, "I can understand you." He shouted with joy, his voice echoing through the space. "I can really understand you now." Over here, Jen Tian couldn't help but feel a little curious. "Rizzo, what was that?" The old man slowly explained, "High elves can use divine power to synchronize another's language with their own. You could consider it a type of magic." He lowered his voice, "I see." At the same time, Hedaya suddenly knelt before Fu Lu. She stared at him with an innocent gaze. Fu Lu was dazed for a long time, his gaze unwavering opposite him. Hedaya still looked at Fu Lu, her eyelashes trembling slightly. After a moment of silence, Hadia's voice rang out, "I feel the wind. A great wind that sweeps across the continent. That is exactly Fu Lu." Returning to reality, he joyfully pointed at himself, "Me." Hedaya nodded lightly, her golden hair swaying gently. "Yes." After speaking, she moved over to Rizzo. Their eyes suddenly met, and silence fell as Hedaya continued to speak. Her words echoed in the old man's ears. "Master Rizzo, do not be too hasty. There will come a time when you will unlock the enlightenment that is blocked and achieve harmony with the great expanse of time." Rizzo bowed his head, the slow movement carrying sincere respect. "Thank you for your guidance." Jen Tian's stern voice cut through the mystical atmosphere. "What are you all doing?" Seeing this, the old man turned back and explained briefly, but clearly, one of her abilities is to see a person's true nature. Hearing this, he narrowed his eyes, his gaze turning sharp, true nature. Jen Tian hurriedly approached Hedaya and asked bluntly, "What do you feel from me?" She instinctively moved closer to Jen Tian. A glimmer of light shone in Haitia's pupils. In that instant, her body floated adrift. Hydia raised her head, looking in an uncertain direction. At this moment, her body was nearly submerged in an endless black hole. Back in reality, Hydia's eyes remained tightly shut. After a while, her eyelashes trembled slightly. Hydia answered unconsciously, her expression extremely confused. "I cannot tell. All I see is just an empty space." Hearing that, Fu Lu opened his mouth and laughed heartily. He asked excitedly, still chuckling, "What is our great general empty inside?" Seeing this, Jen Tian put on a blank expression, his eyes flashing with fury. A moment later, he coldly dragged Fu Lu outside. At the same time, Hytia unconsciously followed Jen Tian's movements with her eyes. She clasped her hands in front of her chest, her hands so pale they seemed unreal. Hytia closed her eyes tightly, deep in thought. It could be nothingness, or it could be infinite capacity. The scene changes to the next morning as the group travels in single file across the barren road. A troop of soldiers could be seen frantically rushing forward. Just then, the knight's eyes snapped open, his gaze locking on. He whipped around to the back, simultaneously ordering the entire army to slow down. The knight issued an urgent warning, his voice echoing through the air orcs ahead. "No, an orc horde has appeared. In front of us are the green-skinned folk, or rather Bukarat Ulo, son of Bukarat Ulo." At that moment, a piercing shout rang out. "The cavalry archers are in the rear, so the cavalry unit will engage." At the same time, Fu Lu charged forward, shouting, "Left flank, follow me." Seeing this, Bukarat Ulo roared in fury, "You horse riders, bunch up!" A flurry of shouts answered him as the orcs swarmed together. Their crude bodies collided to form a solid wall. Bukarat Ulo glared at the group. "I am Bukarat Ulo, different from my father, Bukarat Ulo. My father's mistake was leaving a gap for the enemy to pass through." He angrily replayed the scenario in his mind and gathered his forces where the archers were. "But I, Bukarat Ulo, have blocked off any way around, and there are no archers here. There are only a dozen or so cavalrymen." At this thought, Bukarat Ulo smirked, unable to help, but feel a little excited. "This time we will win." Fu Lu mumbled, his lips curling into a sarcastic smile. "A dense wall of orcs ahead, huh? Why do the orcs in this land love clumping together so much?" Hidea stared straight ahead, carefully assessing the orcs' formation. It's very difficult for charging cavalry to break through. They should wait for the main army or wear them down first. So why are they still charging forward like this? Just then, he unexpectedly raised his bow towards the group. Immediately after, a cold command rang out, "Load the arrow guides." The group acted at once. Hidea instinctively looked behind her. She couldn't help but marvel he let go with both hands on horseback, as if he wasn't even riding. Not even the elves, the race of harmony, could become one with a horse to this extent. Hidea's gaze suddenly froze on one point, her eyelashes trembling visibly. She shuddered as an unsettling memory resurfaced. It was the small bow she had seen when they took down the messenger mage in the city. Just then, Fu Lu turned around. "Fairy lady, hold on tight." Hidea didn't have time to think. She squeezed her eyes shut and held onto him tightly. Fu Lu smiled in amusement, continuing to aim his bow at the enemy. "All right then, fire." As soon as the shout ended, the arrows were released. In the sky, a volley of arrows whistled through the air. The wooden arrows flew straight towards the green orc. The orcs rushed forward in a panic, trying to counterattack. Hidea's eyes widened in amazement as she thought to herself, "An elf's arrow is accurate because it rides the wind." With a strong affinity for nature, an elf's arrow is guided by nature's will, but I don't sense the scent of spirits from their arrows. Their archery is different from the elves, and even while firing freely from a running horse, their arrows are faster than those of the elves. Not just fast, but so fast the naked eye can't see them. On this side, Bukarat Ulo's body tumbled to the ground. He was stunned for a moment. How is it possible? Can humans really shoot bows while riding horses? At the same time, the remaining orcs suddenly fell right on top of him. Faced with the horrifying scene, Bukarat Ulo only had time to let out a scream. In the end, he was nearly speechless, his eyes wide open. In that moment, he unconsciously saw Moscow Ulo. The man waved at Bukarat Ulo while smiling gently. Seeing this, he gave up both thought and action. "Your son Bukarat Ulo is coming to you, father." Immediately after, a swarm of orcs fell right on top of Bukarat Ulo. Seizing the opportunity, Fu Lu shouted decisively, "Charge." In a flash, the group easily broke through the enemy line. Gerard couldn't help but feel bewildered, armored cavalry shooting bows from horseback. No knightly order in the empire possesses such a skill. Just then, a convoy of carriages sped past him. Gerard then covered his mouth and coughed non-stop. He assessed them seriously. 150 people, are they all knights? Moreover, all of them are swordmaster level or higher. Even the Empire's cavalry regiment isn't this formidable. A sword user starts as a sword practitioner. Then comes sword adept, and once they can control aura, they're called a swordsman or a swordmaster. The final realm is sword grandmaster. There are only 15 on the continent, including me. The more Gerard thought, the more confused he became. This is insane. Gathering all the swordmasters on the continent might not even reach 200 people. His gaze fell upon the group of soldiers charging frantically forward. The scene changes to a range of towering mountains. At the same time, Gerard dashed quickly across the grass. He thought to himself constantly, the La Ganjia Mountains are the most treacherous of places. It's difficult to survive here. How on earth could a nation exist in a place like this? Just then, Gerard accidentally bumped into an iron bar. He clutched his aching nose and grumbled, why did they suddenly stop? Gerard's expression changed instantly, his eyes wide with astonishment. He almost screamed internally, how can a structure of this scale exist here in the La Ganjia Mountains?